The dawn came thin and gray, a shy light that seemed to hesitate before touching Winterfell's ancient stones. Jon Snow stood atop the battlements, gloved hands resting on the frosted crenellation, breath misting in the cold air. The wind was a living thing up here, nosing under his cloak, tugging at the dark curls that had slipped loose from his tie. It carried with it the familiar sense of wood smoke, horse, and snow, but there were other smells too. The iron tang of the forges working day and night, the faint reek from the training yard where men pushed themselves to the edge of exhaustion. Below him, the courtyards of Winterfell were already alive. Stable boys hurried back and forth, leading shaggy northern horses to water. Armorers and smiths shouted to one another over the ringing clash of hammer on steel. Men-at-arms moved in small groups across the yard, some laughing, some silent, all of them casting the occasional wary glance up at the walls, as though still unused to the notion that Winterfell was theirs again. Their kings, Jon corrected himself bitterly, fingers tightening on the stone. They called him that now, King in the North. The first time the words had been flung into the air of the great hall, loud and desperate and full of a pain that wanted to be hope, Jon had felt as if the world had lurched sideways. He had looked over his shoulder, half expecting to see Robb there. The young wolf returned at last to claim what was his. But it had been Jon they were looking at with shining eyes and tear-streaked faces. Jon whose name they had roared as if they could drown their grief in it. King in the North. A crown for a bastard who had once sworn his life to the Night's Watch. A soft tread sounded behind him, nearly lost in the wind's low whistle. Ghost padded to his side, white as fallen snow, eyes like fresh spilled blood. The dire wolf brushed against Jon's leg, a weight and warmth that pulled him from thoughts of ravens and oaths and the broken vows that haunted his sleep. "We should be out there," Jon murmured, half to himself, staring north where the land grew harsher and emptier, where the wall stood like a cold memory. Not here, arguing about banners and words. Ghost said nothing, only pressed closer. Jon rubbed his fingers behind the great wolf's ear, feeling the coarse, clean fur and the strength beneath. Bootsteps followed Ghost's arrival, lighter but brisk, accompanied by the faint rustle of thick wool skirts. Jon didn't need to turn to know who had joined him. "You're doing that thing again," Sansa Stark said quietly, coming to stand on his other side. Her cheeks were reddened by the wind, copper hair braided and pinned beneath a dark hood lined in pale fur. The same stark black and gray he wore, though finer, though suited to a lady of Winterfell rather than a boy who had never quite belonged. "What thing?" Jon asked, pretending ignorance. "Staring off into the snow as if you'd rather be anywhere but here." Sansa's gaze followed his into the distance, though he doubted she saw the same ghosts he did. Wishing for the wall, perhaps, or for a world where someone else wears that crown. "I never asked for it," Jon said, the words heavier than the sword at his hip. I told them I was a brother of the Night's Watch still. And they told you the watch broke before you did," Sansa replied, voice sharp but not unkind. "They told you the North needed a king, not another ghost cloaked in black." "Jon." Her gloved hand brushed his arm, a bare touch. "They chose you. We chose you." He heard what she did not say. Robb had been their first choice, their young lion wolf, with his southern crown and southern war. They had chosen him once too, and the Riverlands with him, and look what it had brought them. Burned harvests, broken castles, sons and fathers who would never come home. Jon closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of names press upon him. Stark, Snow, Bastard, King. "Have we had word?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. If a raven had come, he would have been summoned the instant it arrived. "Not yet," Sansa said. "Lord Wyman sent riders as far south as the Twins. Lord Glover's men are watching the Kingsroad. If Robb..." She stopped herself, drew a careful breath. "If my brother crosses into the north, we will know." Our brother, Jon almost corrected, but bit the words back. Robb had been hers before he had been anything to Jon, blood of her blood. The heir of Winterfell whose shadow Jon had grown up in. Sometimes he still saw Robb as the boy with the laughing blue eyes, the one who had clapped Jon on the shoulder after they'd both taken down a straw man together, grinning as if they shared one heart between them. Somewhere in the snows and mud of the south, that boy had become a king. Somewhere that king was bleeding. "I don't want a war with Robb," Jon said, opening his eyes again. The wind bit at them, but he welcomed the sting. "I won't fight my own brother for a chair and a title." Sansa's mouth tightened. "You may not get to choose. The Lord swore to him once, and now they have sworn to you. Oaths are not so easily untied. And there are those who will whisper in his ear that you stole what was his." "I stole nothing," Jon said, more roughly than he intended. Ghost's ears twitched at the tone. "I know," Sansa replied. There was no censure in her voice, only a weary understanding that made her seem older than she was. "But knowing and believing are different things. Robb has been fighting a war for years now. Men change in war. So do boys." Jon thought of the stories that had reached even the Wall, of Robb's victories, sharp and sudden, and then of his missteps, his broken vow to Walder Frey, the slow erosion of his allies. Of Catelyn Stark, too, accused of treachery for the sake of her daughters, then vanished from every tale as if she'd walked into the river and never come out. "Maybe he is dead already," Jon said quietly. The words tasted like ash. "Maybe there's nothing to talk about at all. Then the raven we are waiting for is the one that will tell us who killed him," Sansa said, voice turning brittle. "I would rather have his anger than his ghost." They stood in silence then, three stark shapes against the winter. The Wolf King who had never wanted a crown, the Lady reborn from southern ashes, and the White Beast who watched the world with patient, knowing eyes. The sun struggled higher, doing little to soften the hard edges of stone or the harder lines of duty. Somewhere to the south, beyond the end of Jon's sight, the King's Road wound through woods and hills, threading its way between charred farms and trampled fields. On that road, men were riding. One of them had once been called the Young Wolf, and the sound of his horse's hooves on the cold-packed earth was the echo of a choice that would remake the North. The King's Road had become a scar carved deep into the land, a long wound of churned mud and ruts filled with brown water. Hooves splashed and sucked at the ground, each step a dull, sucking sound that seemed to echo in the hollow space where Robb Stark's certainty used to live. Robb shifted in the saddle, feeling the familiar ache in his back and thighs. He had spent so many days astride a horse these past years that he sometimes felt more at home in the saddle than on his own 2 feet. Gray wind moved easily beneath him, a dark gray shadow with eyes like cold smoke, untroubled by the mud or the scent of exhaustion clinging to the men around them. They were fewer now. He could see it each time he turned in his saddle and let his gaze pass over the column of riders and the small train of wagons that followed them. Gaps where banners had flown once. Faces that no longer looked back at him because their heads were bowed or their bones lay rotting in fields they tried to hold. Robb had worn a crown once, a circlet of bronze and iron with dire wolf heads at the temple. It sat wrapped in cloth at the bottom of a chest now, its weight having proved less than the weight of the promises he'd broken. He could still see Walder Frey's lined face in his mind's eye, the watery cunning in those pale blue eyes when Robb had stood in the twins and pledged himself to a Frey daughter. He could taste the cool river air that had wrapped around him when he'd ridden back across the bridge with the promise still fresh on his tongue. Young enough to believe that he could carry a kingdom and a heart's desire in the same hands without dropping either. He had broken that promise. Jane's smile, gentle, warm, so at odds with the iron stink of the battlefield, rose unbidden before him. He loved her, and he did not regret that love, but the cost of it had been counted in men's lives and lordly anger. The Karstarks had turned sour, their grief turning to bitterness. The Freys had grown cold and quiet, the laughter in their halls drying up like old blood. He had been Robb the Lord, Robb the brother, Robb the boy for so long. Then he had become Robb the king. Somewhere along the way he had begun to understand that being a king meant there was no room left for being anything else. A rider pushed his way through the column toward him, cloak flapping at his back. It was Edmure Tully, face drawn, lines at the corners of his mouth that had not been there when Robb first marched from Winterfell. The trout banner of House Tully drooped on its staff above the column, weighted by damp wool and defeat. "We've sighted the Green Fork," Edmure said, pulling his horse alongside Robb's. "The river's swollen from the rains. Crossing will be slow." "Slow is better than drowned," Robb answered, scanning the horizon. The light was fading, the sky bruising violet at the edges, but he could see the faint silver gleam of water through the trees. "How far to the crossing?" "A few hours yet," Edmure said. "If we make camp now, we reach it by mid-morning tomorrow." Robb considered. Each hour they delayed was another hour their enemies might use, but he had men whose hands shook when they dismounted, whose arms trembled when they lifted their shields. There were limits to how far steel and stubbornness could carry a man. "Camp," Robb said at last. "On the higher ground. Post sentries. I don't want to wake to Lannister trumpets on our doorstep." Edmure nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. He wheeled his horse away to spread the word, bellowing commands with the automatic ease of a lord who had spent his life shouting over the roar of rivers and men. Gray Wind lifted his head suddenly, nostrils flaring. A low growl bubbled up from his chest. Robb felt the answering prickle along his own spine, that strange, half-understood bond that sometimes jolted him awake at night with the taste of blood in his mouth and the feel of grass under his paws. "What is it?" Robb murmured, reaching down to brush his gloved fingers along the direwolf's back. Gray Wind's ears flattened. He stared back along the road they had come, lips peeling from his teeth. A rider was approaching, fast, splashing mud with reckless abandon. The horse's flanks were flecked with foam, its rider bent low over its neck, cloak snapping in the wind. Robb felt his stomach tighten. Ravens brought words. Riders brought urgency. The man reined in hard before him, the horse's hooves skidding. He nearly slid from the saddle, catching himself at the last moment with a hand on the pommel. His face was streaked with mud, his beard crusted with it, but Robb recognized the man as one of Lord Manderley's retainers, sent south weeks ago to watch the crossings and bear any news that came. "Your Grace," the rider gasped, ripping the glove from his right hand and fumbling inside his cloak. "A raven came to White Harbor. Lord Wyman bade me ride hard." Robb heard the title as if from a great distance. "Your Grace." It no longer sat comfortably on his shoulders. It had become something men said out of habit rather than faith. "What news?" Robb asked, voice level. Gray Wind's growl deepened, but the man didn't flinch. Whatever had driven him to ride like this had already spent his fear. The rider pulled a tube of oiled leather from his cloak, bound with blue and white ribbons stained darker where the rain had touched them. Robb took it, fingers steady despite the small tremor in his chest, and worked the cap loose. A strip of parchment slid into his palm, crisp and dry, its surface crowded with thick, sprawling letters. Wyman Manderley's seal hung broken from the ribbon. The words above it were not the portly lord's, though. Robb knew his hand. This script was another's. Firmer, angled, as if each stroke were carved rather than written. He read it once, then again, pulse hissing in his ears. Around him, the sounds of the encampment blurred to a dull roar. Men shouting, horses snorting, the sea. Ladder of pots. It all faded beneath the weight of ink on parchment. "The North has crowned a new king?" Edmure's voice came from his left, incredulous. He must have ridden back when he saw the messenger. "Surely that's some mistake. They swore to you, Robb." "We all did." Robb's eyes traced the lines a third time, though they did not change. "To Robb Stark, Lord of Winterfell and once king in the north, from Jon Snow, by the will of the Northern Lords acclaimed as Jon Stark, king in the north and protector of the realm of ice." Words about burned castles, about Bolton treachery and Ironborn raids, about the need for a king who was there, in the north, to hold its people together. Words about oaths made in good faith and broken by distance and disaster. Words Jon would not have written about himself. Robb could feel that in the careful phrasing. These were the Lord's arguments dressed in Jon's hand. Then, at the bottom, a line that cut sharper than any accusation. "If you live, come home. We are your brothers still." Robb stared at the words until they blurred, until the ink seemed to run and pool like fresh blood. Gray wind brushed against his leg, whining low in his throat. Night came with the rain, a steady, cold fall that turned the camp's hastily dug ditches into thin rivers and drummed hollowly on the canvas roofs of the tents. The air inside Robb's command tent was thick with the smells of damp wool, tallow candles, and the faint bitter tang of ink. The letter lay on the table before him, weighed down by a knife so the corners would not curl. Around it, the map of the north spread like a wounded beast, its inked rivers and forests barely visible in the wavering lantern light. Small carved dire wolves and trout marked the last known positions of his bannermen, clustered too far south for his liking. Catelyn Stark stood opposite him, hands braced on the edge of the table. The lines at the corners of her mouth were etched deeper than they had been when they'd left Winterfell together. Her auburn hair was threaded with more gray now, though she tried to keep it pinned and neat even here, in the damp heart of a traveling war. "Read it to me," she said quietly. Robb picked up the parchment. He didn't need the words any longer. They had already carved themselves into him, but he wanted to hear them again in his own voice, to see how they tasted when they passed his lips. He read. He read of Winterfell retaken and raised from ash, of the Boltons flayed from their stolen seats, of the Ironborn driven back into the sea. He read of lords gathering like crows around a new hope, their faith not yet exhausted despite everything the realm had done to them. He read of Jon, who had returned from the wall when the Black Brothers' hold on him had broken with the worlds, who had stood among them with a Stark's face and a Wildling's scars. He read the line at the end last, voice roughening despite his best efforts. "If you live, come home. We are your brothers still." When he fell silent, the only sound was the rain and the occasional snap of the candle as it consumed itself. Catelyn's head bowed. For a moment he thought she might be crossing herself, praying to the seven she had brought north with her. But when she looked up again, he saw only the cold, hard clarity of the woman who had once stood on a bridge between two enemy hosts and dared them to kill her. "They have named Jon King," she said, not making it a question. "Yes," Robb said. The word felt too small for what it contained. "The lords met at Winterfell. They raised him up. Jon Stark," he writes. There was no bitterness in the name, only a weary acceptance. The Manderleys, the Glovers, the Mormonts, the Umbers. Even the Riswells, it says, though I'd like to see that. Catelyn's mouth pressed into a thin line at the surname. Stark, for the boy she had never fully been able to see as Ned's son. It was an old hurt, one that lay coiled between them even now, softer around the edges but not wholly gone. "Your father's blood lives in him," she said at last, as if forcing the words out. "And the North has always loved Ned Stark more than it loved any crown that might sit on his head." Robb dragged a hand through his damp hair. "They loved me once," he said, hating how young he sounded. "They still do," Catelyn said. "But love is not blind, Robb. It sees your victories and your failures both." She glanced down at the map, at the scattered tokens. "You have been fighting far from the home they entrusted to you. Winterfell was burned while we were winning glory in the Riverlands. They have been left to suffer Lannister and Greyjoy, Frey and Bolton, all in your absence." "My absence?" The words came sharper than he intended. "You think I wanted to leave Winterfell to them? To let Theon?" He could not finish the sentence. Theon's name was a thorn lodged in all their throats. "I think none of us chose the roads that lay before us," Catelyn said. "But we walked them all the same. The question now is what road lies before you, before us." She tapped the letter with one finger. "Jon speaks of coming home, of brothers. That's no threat. That's an offer. An offer to lay down my crown and bend the knee to him," Robb said. "To be what, his captain? His warden? I was named king in the north by the same men who have now raised him up. How do I look them in the eye if I go crawling back and say they chose wrong the first time?" Catelyn's eyes were the same clear blue as the Tully trout scales in sunlight. They were not unkind, but they did not soften for him now. "You don't," she said. "You look them in the eye and tell them that they chose twice, and both times they chose a Stark. That the first choice marched south and learned what it is to lose, and the second stayed and learned what it is to hold. That the wisest kings know when they are not the only ones fit to rule. He stared at her. "You would have me give it up? Just like that?" "I would have you live," she said, voice suddenly shaking. "I have already buried one husband. I have dreamed of burying my children too many nights to count. I would have you live, Robb. If that means setting down the crown before it crushes you, then yes. I would have you kneel." The word hit him like a thrown stone. Kneel. He had knelt before Walder Frey and the twins, and the memory of it still made his back itch as if expecting a blade. He had knelt before the heart tree in Winterfell's godswood, when he was small enough that his knees sunk in the soft moss and his father's hand had rested heavy and reassuring on his shoulder. But never to another king. Not since he had been raised up himself. Not since his men had cried his name and sworn their swords to him. "I swore oaths too," he said. "They bent the knee to me. I swore to be their king. And now the North is tearing itself in two with those same oaths," Catelyn replied. "Do you think the Manderleys and Glovers will gladly break with Jon for your sake? That the Mormonts will set aside the king they can see and touch for the one who is a rumor of banners in the south? You speak of vows as if they were mine's laid on you alone. They bind every man who spoke them." Robb turned away from the table so she would not see the flash of helpless anger in his eyes. The tense canvas trembled with the force of the rain outside. Somewhere a man cursed as a stake slipped in the mud. "What would you have me do?" he asked, not quite able to keep the despair from the question. "Ride north and kneel, and let the songs say that the young wolf tucked his tail between his legs and trotted home when someone else howled louder? I would have you decide which matters more to you," Catelyn said. "Songs or the North's survival? Titles or your people's lives? Your pride or your brother?" Brother. The word twisted in his chest. He saw Jon's face as it had been the last time they'd stood together in Winterfell's yard. Both of them flushed from sparring, breathless with laughter. He had clapped Jon on the arm and promised that when he returned, he would see the wall, that he would bring half the North with him just to gape at the thing. They had parted as boys certain of endless tomorrows. Now the next time they met, one would have to bow. "Let me think," Robb said at last, voice low. "Please." Catelyn studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Don't think too long, my son," she said. "Every day we linger here, more ravens fly in the north, more tongues wag. Better that you answer with your own voice than let others speak for you." When she was gone, he picked up the letter again. His fingers had left faint smears of dirt on the edges of the parchment. Jon's hand was strong and plain, as if he had carved the words with a knife point on wood. Robb traced the last line with his thumb. "We are your brothers still." He did not know if Jon had written that thinking of blood, of the Starks, or thinking of the Night's Watch, those black-cloaked men who had once been his true family. Perhaps it did not matter. Either way, it was a rope thrown across a widening chasm. The question was whether Robb Stark would reach for it, or fall with his crown into the dark. The great hall of Winterfell had always seemed vast to Jon when he was a boy, its high rafters disappearing into shadow, its stone columns thick as old oaks. Now, sitting on the high seat with the wolf heads snarling at his back, it felt smaller somehow, as if the press of bodies and expectations had pushed the walls closer. The fire pit roared in the center of the hall, sending heat and smoke up to fight the cold creeping in from the doors. Torches guttered along the walls, their light catching on mail and leather, on the gleam of polished helms and the dull shine of worn steel. The air was a stew of smells, meat and ale and sweat, wet wool and oiled armor and the faint sour tang of fear. They had crammed as many lords and captains into the hall as the space would allow. Benches were packed tight. Men who had known each other since childhood were pressed shoulder to shoulder and still managed to find room for distrust between them. Voices rose and fell in waves, some hoarse with anger, some smooth with caution. Sansa sat to Jon's right, back straight, hands folded in her lap. She wore a gown of thick gray wool embroidered at the neck and cuffs with the running wolves of House Stark. Around her shoulders lay a mantle of white direwolf fur, fastened with a silver clasp shaped like a howling wolf. It had once belonged to their mother. Sansa wore it like a shield. "The Manderleys will not turn their cloaks again," Lord Wyman was saying, his huge body nearly overflowing the bench that had been brought in especially for him. His voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. "We've pledged to King Jon, and that's an end to it." Robb had his chance to mine the north. He chose the south instead. He chose to fight for his father's honor and his people's freedom, Lord Glover snapped, his dark beard bristling. "Don't speak of choice as if he'd gone south for sweet summer wine and songs. You were there, Manderley. You saw the Lannisters work in the Riverlands. And I also saw the smoking shells of villages on the White Knife," Wyman retorted. "Saw my ships burned at sea while your king in the north chased glory. We all saw something, Glover. It's a matter of which scars we choose to remember." A murmur of agreement ran through some parts of the hall, while others scowled. Lord Mormont, hard-eyed and gray as storm-weathered stone, rapped her knuckles on the table. "The boy is alive," she said. "That's more than can be said for most kings these days. If Robb Stark comes home, we owe him at least the courtesy of hearing what he has to say." "Aye, and what then?" A lesser lord shouted from farther down, cheeks flushed dark with ale and emotion. "We've already bent the knee to one Stark. Are we to bend it again? My bones can't take much more kneeling, my lords." Laughter broke the tension for a heartbeat before it snapped back into place. Jon sat silent, listening. He knew better than to leap into a pack of wolves when they were snarling, even if he wore a crown on his head. Ghost lay at his feet, head resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded but watchful. Every now and then the white wolf's gaze would flick up, as if making sure Jon still sat there. "He writes of brothers," Lord Serwyn said, tapping the copy of the letter that had been circulated among them. "He does not threaten. He does not demand we tear down what we've built. That speaks for something. It speaks for guilt," came another voice, thin and sharp. It belonged to one of the smaller hill lords, a man whose lands had been trampled first by Lannister outriders and then by Robb's own foraging parties. "He knows he left us to burn while he played at lions and trouts." Sansa's fingers shifted slightly in her lap, a tiny movement like the twitch of a bowstring. Jon felt it as if it had been a tug at his sleeve. He leaned close enough that his words would not carry beyond the dais. "If you have something to say it," he murmured. Her eyes remained fixed on the hall, but her lashes lowered for a heartbeat. "They're turning this into a feast of grievances," she said under her breath. "If it goes on much longer, someone will say something that can't be unsaid. You need to remind them why they're here." "Because they crowned me?" he asked, half grim. "Because winter is coming, and the only thing that will matter soon is whether we have enough men to stand the storm," she answered. "Robb can be a rival or an ally. You need to make them see which serves them better." He studied her profile for a heartbeat, noting the firmness of her jaw, the way her eyes moved over the crowd, weighing and measuring. She had learned the game in King's Landing, and the scars of that schooling ran deeper than any he could see. He rose to his feet. The movement sent a ripple through the hall. Conversations faltered, eyes turned toward the dais. The word "Your Grace" murmured through the crowd like a cold breeze. "My lords," Jon said, voice carrying more strongly than he felt. "You know why we're gathered." There were a few dry chuckles at that. They knew well enough and had been gnawing on it like a bone since the first copies of Robb's letter arrived. "When you raised me up in this hall," Jon went on, "I told you I was no king. I told you I was a man of the Night's Watch, a bastard with more scars than sense. You chose me anyway. Not because I was the strongest or the cleverest or the most beloved. You chose me because I was here." He let his gaze travel over their faces, the old and young, the scarred and soft, men who had lost sons and those who had never had time to father them. "While Robb fought in the south, I fought on the wall. I saw things I wish I'd never seen. I fought men in furs and bones, and other things that wore no faces at all. I broke my vows because I believed the Night's Watch had forgotten why it was formed. I came back to a north in pieces, and I tried to hold those pieces together as best I could. He spread his hands slightly, as if displaying the imperfect fruits of that labor. The banners hanging between the pillars, the men in their seats, the very fact that Winterfell's roof stood whole above them. Robb Stark is alive, he said. He is my father's son as surely as I am, whatever name I bear. He has bled for the North. He has made mistakes for it too. So have I. So have we all. The question is not which of us has the better crown. The question is whether the North can afford 2 kings when winter's at the door. A murmur rose again, softer this time. If he comes home, Jon said, I will not raise a hand against him. I won't set brother against brother for the sake of being the one whose name the singers remember. I won't be the king who tore his own house in 2. And if he demands your crown, someone called. If he says we chose wrong, Jon met the man's gaze. Then he'll have to explain that to you, he said simply. To all of you who swore to him once and swore to me later. If I must bend, I will bend. I've knelt before harder things than any man. I've knelt before the heart tree and the cold, and before death itself. I'll do it again if that's what it takes to keep the North from killing itself while the true enemy gathers in the dark. He did not speak of white shadows or blue eyes, of the way the wind sometimes sounded like distant screams when it blew from the north. He did not need to. His voice carried enough of that memory. Sansa watched him as he spoke, something like surprise flickering in her eyes, then shifting to a resigned, almost fond exasperation. Jon had always been like this, she thought. Even when he had been only a boy brooding in the corner, he had been willing to throw himself between others and whatever monsters they feared, whether that monster was a drunken stable hand or the cold beyond the wall. Lord Mormont nodded once, a curt gesture. Well said, she grunted. But if it comes to war, your grace, we'll need more than words. I know, Jon said. So let's make sure it doesn't come to war if it doesn't have to. The hall did not erupt in cheers. This was not the sort of speech that sent men leaping to their feet, shouting oaths and banging cups. Instead, a different kind of sound spread, low, thoughtful, uncertain. Men leaning toward one another, murmuring, weighing, considering. It was enough for now. The camp had settled into the uneasy quiet that came after a long day's march and a longer evening's arguments. Men huddled around low fires, hunched against the rain, cloaks drawn tight. Laughter came in bursts, quickly swallowed by the weather. Somewhere a man plucked a sad, thin tune on a harp that had seen better days. Robb walked the perimeter with gray wind at his side, boots sinking into the softened earth. The rain had lessened to a fine mist, more felt than seen, clinging to his hair and lashes. Now and then, a sentry straightened as he passed, offering a quick, muttered "Your Grace," as if afraid to say it too loudly. He returned their nods with a tired smile, but inside he flinched at the title each time. The crown in the chest back in his tent felt heavier with every step he took away from it. Gray wind kept pace with him easily, his paws making little sound on the wet ground. His fur was dark with damp, raindrops beating along the thick ruff of his neck. Now and then, the direwolf's head would turn, nostrils flaring as he tested the air, ears pricking at distant sounds Robb could not hear. They reached the northern edge of the camp, where the lanterns thinned and the darkness closed in like a curtain. Beyond, the land sloped away into a stand of black-barked trees, their branches clawing at the sky. Somewhere past those trees, past rivers and hills and burned farms, lay the neck and beyond it the north. Home. Robb stopped, resting a hand on the rough trunk of a young elm. The bark was slick beneath his palm. He pushed wet hair back from his forehead and stared into the darkness until his eyes played tricks on him, turning shadows into familiar shapes. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a boy in a too-big leather jerkin, wooden sword in hand, grinning as he darted behind a tree to spring some ambush that would never quite work as planned. "Jon," he whispered, then shook his head as if he could dislodge the memory. Grey wind pressed his massive head against Robb's hip, a low woof puffing from his jaws. Robb sank his fingers into the wolf's wet fur, grateful for the solid reality of him. "What do you think?" he asked softly. "Should we go home? Let someone else wear the bloody thing and see if it breaks his neck instead." Grey wind closed his eyes briefly, as if in answer or simple contentment, then turned his head northward. His ears pricked, body going still, every sense reaching. Robb followed his gaze into the darkness. He saw nothing, heard only the drip of water and the distant mutter of the camp. Yet a slim, treacherous thread of hope tugged at him. He had always trusted the wolf's instincts more than his own. "Your Grace," the soft voice came from behind him. Robb turned to see his uncle, Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, standing a few paces away. The older man's cloak was pulled up against the rain, but his gray hair was damp at the temples, his lined face unreadable. "Uncle," Robb said, "I didn't hear you." "Good," Brynden said dryly. "Means I've not grown entirely useless." He stepped closer, eyes scanning the tree line before settling on Robb. "Your mother told me you'd come out here to sulk." "I'm not sulking," Robb said, half a protest, half a laugh. Felt good to let it out, even if it came out brittle. "I'm thinking." Forgive me," Brynden said. "I often confuse the two in young men." His gaze flicked to the north, then back. "Robb, this Jon of yours, you trust him?" The of yours held no mockery, only curiosity. Robb looked back toward the darkness, seeing his half-brother's face as clearly as any apparition. "Yes," he said, "more than I trust half the men who call me king. He was stubborn and brooding, and he had a temper when he thought something was unjust. But he was honest. He'd rather cut off his own hand than break an oath. Except the one to his black brothers," Brynden said mildly. "That's different," Robb said immediately, then caught himself. From what the letter says, the Watch was half in ruins and the realm had forgotten it altogether. If leaving was what it took to save the North, he trailed off, realizing what he'd just admitted. Brynden's mouth twitched at the corner. "Seems you've already decided what you think of oath-breaking, at least in his case," the Blackfish said. "Interesting," Robb sighed. "What would you do?" he asked. "If you were me." "If I were you," Brynden said, "I'd wish I were someone else." He held up a hand as Robb made a face. "It's no small thing, lad, being asked to set down a crown. Most kings who lose them do so along with their heads. This way, at least, someone's given you the courtesy of asking first." "So you think I should kneel?" Robb said, tasting the words again. They still felt like grit in his teeth. "I think the North having two kings is as sensible as a horse having two heads," Brynden said. "One will always be trying to bite the other. And I've ridden enough horses to know they're stubborn beasts at the best of times. As for which of you should bend," he shrugged. "Jon has the stronger position. He's on the ground you're fighting to reclaim. He has their hearts fresh. You're a memory and a rumor to most of them now." Robb flinched. It was one thing to know it, another to hear it said aloud. "But you also have things he doesn't," Brynden went on. "You have experience. You've led men in battle more than once. You've dealt with southern lords long enough to know where they keep their knives. A wise king might see value in that. A wise brother would." "And if he's not wise?" Robb asked. Brynden snorted. "Then he's not the boy you've been mooning over to anyone who'll listen these past years." His gaze softened. "You've been carrying this war alone for a long time, Robb. Too long. You think you've failed them. Perhaps you have, in some ways. Most kings do. But this," he nodded toward the north. "This might be your chance to share the burden again. To be a brother first and a king second." Rain trickled down the back of Robb's neck. He shivered, though not from cold. "Do you think they'll despise me?" he asked, hating the vulnerability of the question. "If I kneel?" "Some will," Brynden said bluntly. "Men who think courage is never bending, even when the wind's strong enough to snap them in half. They won't matter long. Either they'll see sense, or the storm will break them. The ones who matter are the ones who'll look at what you did and see not weakness, but the courage it takes to say, "I can't carry this alone any longer." Robb looked down at Grey Wind. The wolf stared back, unblinking, rain dripping from his muzzle. "We ride north," Robb said, the words surprising him with the rightness that settled over him as he spoke them. "At first light, no more detours, no more Riverlands, no more crowns in the south. We go home." Bryndon's shoulders eased, as if some long-held breath had been released. "I'll see to the orders," he said. "Wait," Robb said. "I need to tell them myself." He straightened, feeling some of the old steel return to his spine. Not the brittle metal of pride, but something tempered by loss and hard-won understanding. "We march as Robb Stark of Winterfell," he said. "Not as the young wolf, not as the king in the north. If I bow to Jon, I want it to be as a brother, not as a beaten king crawling to a usurper." Bryndon's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close. "There's the Stark in you," he said. "Ned would have been proud of that much, at least." As his uncle strode back toward the heart of the camp, Robb turned his face north again. The rain on his cheeks could have been tears, but it didn't matter. Tomorrow the road would turn toward home. Whatever awaited him there, crown, axe, or open arms, he would meet it standing. Snow had begun to fall again, thin flakes twisting down from a sky the color of old iron. They melted when they touched the flagstones of Winterfell's yard, leaving dark specks that vanished beneath boots and hooves. Below, Ser Davos Seaworth bellowed instructions in a voice that managed to cut through the wind and the clatter of armor alike. The Onion Knight had never held command of a host like this, not truly, but he had spent enough time watching kings squander men to have firm ideas on how not to do it. He moved among the lines of men with a practiced sailor's stride, adjusting grips on spears, demonstrating how to lock shields together. "Hold there," he barked at a lad barely old enough to shave. "You drop that point when a man charges you, you may as well hold up a cup and ask him to pour his sword right into your belly." "Higher," I said. "That's better. Imagine the Lannister who took your cow standing in front of you. Or better yet, the one who burned your neighbor's field. I've yet to meet a man who can't keep his spear up when he's thinking of someone he hates." The boy's jaw tightened, and the spear's tip steadied. From the stone balcony above the yard, Jon watched the organized chaos with a mixture of pride and dread. Each man who stepped into line, each shield lifted, was one more body between the north and whatever would come howling down from beyond the wall. It was also one more name he might one day have to speak over a grave. "Ser Davos has a way of making everything sound like the sea," Sansa observed, stepping closer so her voice wouldn't carry beyond them. "Even war in the snow. It's all storms to him," Jon said. "Storms and ships and men who drown if the man at the helm steers wrong." He felt a faint smile tug at his mouth. "He tells good stories, though. The men like him." "They like you," Sansa corrected. "They trust him because you brought him here, because he stands at your side." Jon did not answer. Trust was a fragile thing. He had seen it shatter into spears and blades more than once. But he was grateful for Davos all the same. The older man's blunt counsel had steadied him more than once since the crown had landed on his head like a thrown hammer. "Any word from the wall?" Sansa asked, her breath ghosting in the chill air. "Nothing since the last raven," Jon said. "They're holding, for now." "And from the south?" she pressed. He shook his head. The silence from that quarter worried him more than any shout. Ravens were slow, but word traveled faster than birds when men wanted it to. He would have expected rumors at least, tales carried by merchants or refugees. Instead, there was only a growing sense of everything beyond the neck receding into a kind of gray distance, as if the north were being slowly sheared away from the rest of the realm. Sansa rested her hands on the stone railing. Her knuckles were pale beneath the skin, but her voice stayed even. "When he comes," she said, "do you know what you'll say?" Jon watched a man in the yard lose his grip on his shield. It slipped from nerveless fingers and clattered to the ground. Davos barked at him to fetch it up before the cold took his fingers as well as his courage. "No," Jon admitted. "Do you?" "I know what I would say if I were him," Sansa said. "But that's not the same." She glanced sidelong at him. "You might start with 'welcome home.' It's harder to draw a sword against someone who's just welcomed you home." "He might think it's mockery," Jon said, "after I've taken his place." "You didn't take his place," Sansa said sharply. "You filled the void he left." She took a slow breath. "You're thinking like a bastard again, Jon. As if you've no right to anything that isn't scraps." "It's hard to forget," he said, though there was no heat in it. "Even with a crown." She made a quiet, frustrated sound. "Well, remember this instead," she said. "You brought me home. You avenged our brother and father. You stood between the North and the Boltons when no one else would. Whatever name you wore before, the man you are now has earned more than scraps." He let the words sit between them, absorbing some of their warmth. It was easier to believe he had stumbled into all of this by accident than to accept that he had done anything worthy of it. A horn sounded from the walls, not the long single note that summoned men to arms, nor the deep triple blast that had haunted his dreams since the first time he'd heard it, high and terrified and impossible. This was a higher, quicker call, the sort they used when a party approached the gates. Jon's head snapped up. Ghost, who had been drowsing at his feet, rose in a fluid motion, fur bristling. "What is it?" Sansa asked. "We'll find out," Jon said. He turned away from the balcony. "Come." They descended through the keep like blood through veins, the sounds of the yard fading behind them. Servants pressed against the walls to let them pass. Some dipped quick bows, others stared openly, eyes wide. Jon felt every gaze like a hand on his back. In the courtyard near the main gate, men were already gathering. The gate itself remained shut, but the heavy oak and iron doors trembled faintly as someone on the other side hammered with a gloved fist. Snowflakes drifted inward through gaps in the stone, melting on the dark, damp ground. "Who is it?" Jon called to the nearest man on the wall. "Riders from the south, your grace," the guard shouted down. "Banner of the direwolf, black on gray, and the trout too. No others." Jon exchanged a glance with Sansa. Her face had gone very still. "Open the gate," Jon said. "Your grace, we should," began one of the older captains, stepping forward, hand on his sword. "We should open the gate," Jon repeated more sharply. "If this is who we think it is and we leave him standing in the snow, every tongue in the north will know of it by nightfall. And if it's not..." His hand fell to Longclaw's hilt. "Then we'll deal why. Take that too." The man hesitated, then nodded and signaled. Chains clanked as the winches turned. The great doors creaked inward, snow-dusted hinges complaining. The cold that rushed in felt purer somehow, untouched by the warmth of fires or the breath of men. It struck Jon like a memory of open country, of riding out from Winterfell as a boy, the world seeming impossibly large. A small column of riders waited beyond the gate, horses snorting in the cold, steaming. At their head rode a tall young man in a plain leather cloak, no crown on his head, no gaudy armor on his shoulders. His hair had grown longer than Jon remembered, curling damply at his neck. His beard was patchier, as if he'd been too busy to bother trimming it properly. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that had not been there when they last stood side by side. But his blue eyes were the same. Stark eyes. Ned's eyes. "Robb," Jon breathed. "The young wolf." No crown, no banners beyond his house and his mother's, reigned in just inside the courtyard. For a moment, neither brother moved. The world seemed to narrow to the space between them, the air heavy with all the words they'd never had the chance to say. Then Robb swung down from his horse. His boots hit the stone with a dull, solid sound. Gray wind slipped from among the horses like a shadow, eyes bright, fur bristling as he caught sight of Ghost. The two dire wolves approached one another warily, heads low, moving in a wide circle that slowly tightened. Ghost's fur stood up along his spine, but he did not snarl. Grey Wind's lips lifted briefly, showing teeth, then smoothed again. After a moment, they closed the last small distance and touched noses, breath mingling in white plumes. Jon felt something unclench in his chest at the sight. He stepped forward. Robb did the same. Behind them, the yard held its breath. Up close, Robb looked both exactly as Jon remembered and entirely changed. The boy who had once tried to grow a beard and failed now wore one streaked with road dust and a few errant threads of red where the wind had bitten his cheeks. His shoulders seemed broader, the easy arrogance they'd once carried replaced by a heavier, more deliberate carriage. There were faint scars along his jaw and at his temple, pale against his skin. "Jon," Robb said. His voice was roughened, deeper, but the sound of it struck Jon with almost physical force. He had imagined this, in restless nights on the wall and later in the uneasy bed of the Lord's chamber. But imagination had always fallen short of this simple, thunderous reality. "Robb," Jon replied. For a moment they simply stood there, words floundering in the gap between them. Around them, the yard seemed to recede, the watching men blurring into a ring of uncertain faces. Ghost and Grey Wind had finished their circling and were sitting side by side now, though Ghost kept flicking glances at the larger wolf as if mildly offended by how much space he took up. "You look terrible," Robb said suddenly. Jon huffed out something that might have been a laugh. "So do you." The corner of Robb's mouth twitched. For a heartbeat, Jon saw the boy who had once tackled him into a snowbank and shoved snow down his collar, both of them howling with laughter until Catelyn had come storming out to scold them for acting like wildlings. "Welcome home," Jon said then. The words came easier than he'd expected. "Winterfell is yours, as it's always been." Robb's eyes flicked briefly to the high seat visible through the open doors of the great hall, then back to Jon's face. Snow melted on his eyelashes. "I came as soon as I could," Robb said. "When I got your letter." He hesitated. "You write like father." Jon shrugged, feeling a strange, shy flush. "He taught me," he said. "Well, Maester Luwin did. But father made sure I didn't write like a fool." Robb nodded slowly, as if that small shared memory were a stone placed carefully to begin a bridge. "I brought no crown," he said, raising his voice just enough that the men at the edges could hear. "I come as Robb Stark of Winterfell. Nothing more, nothing less." A murmur ran through the gathered men. Some looked relieved, others wary. Sansa had come down from the balcony and stood a little behind Jon's shoulder now, her mantle catching the snow. Robb's gaze snagged on her. For a moment, all the hardness in his face cracked. "Sansa," he breathed. She stepped forward, chin lifting, eyes bright. "Robb," she said, and then she was in his arms, snow and distance forgotten, hugging him as tightly as if she could keep him from being pulled away by any more wars. Jon stepped back, giving them space. Ghost pressed against his leg, tail flicking. The sounds of the yard swelled again. Men shifting, clearing throats, muttering. Someone sobbed once, quickly smothered. When Sansa stepped away, wiping at her cheeks with a gloved hand, Robb's gaze found Jon's again. "We should talk," Robb said quietly. "Somewhere with walls, and fewer ears." Jon nodded. "The solar," he said. "It was father's. It'll do." He gestured. Men parted to let them through, like tall grass brushed aside by passing wolves. As they walked toward the keep, side by side, Jon could feel the eyes on their backs. Every step was weighed, every glance measured. Inside, the corridors felt tighter than Jon remembered, the ceilings lower. The sounds of the yard dulled to a distant murmur. Torches flickered in their brackets, casting long shadows on stone and tapestry. In the solar, the air was warmer, scented faintly with old parchment and beeswax. The desk where Ned Stark had once sat was strewn with maps and letters. Jon moved some aside to make room. A fire crackled in the hearth, its light throwing copper highlights into Sansa's hair as she slipped in behind them and closed the door. For a moment, none of them spoke. Ghost flopped down near the hearth, while Grey Wind remained standing, pacing once around the room before settling close to the door, as if keeping guard against any intruding world beyond. Robb moved to the window and stared out at the snow-dusted courtyard. His shoulders rose and fell with a slow breath. "I never thought I'd see this place again," he said. "Not like this. Not with the walls standing, the towers whole." Jon thought of Winterfell as they'd found it, gutted and blackened, the smell of old ash and rot thick in every room. He thought of the long months of scraping and rebuilding, of watching men work through snow and wind to put stone upon stone because they needed a home more than they feared the cold. "It was close," he said. "The Boltons. They would have flayed the bones if we'd let them. But the North remembered. And the North came." Robb turned from the window. His eyes lingered on the maps, the letters, the tools of rule scattered across the desk. "And the North named you king," he said. Jon shrugged, a small, restless movement. "They needed someone," he said, echoing his words from the hall. "I was here." Robb studied him for a long moment. "You were always here," he said, "even when you weren't. I had men tell me you'd gone to the wall, that you'd faced wildlings and worse beyond. They spoke of you as if you were some story told to frighten children into staying near the fire at night. Jon Snow will get you if you wander too close to the woods. That sort of thing." Jon snorted. "That makes me a monster, not a king." "Sometimes the realm needs a monster on its side," Robb said quietly. "Father knew that. He just hoped it wouldn't be one of his." Silence stretched between them, filled with ghosts. Sansa broke it. "You both talk as if you're strangers," she said. "But you grew up together. You shared a yard and a father in winters. You're acting like diplomats at a parley when you could be brothers around a hearth." Robb's mouth twisted. "Brothers who might be about to argue over a crown," he said. "Or decide what to do with it," Sansa countered. "Together." She stepped closer to the desk, eyes moving between them. "Jon has told me what he's seen beyond the wall. I have told him what I saw in the south. You have seen both now, Robb. You know as well as we do that the games in King's Landing will not matter if the dead start walking in the snow." Robb's gaze flicked to Jon. "You believe it's that bad?" he asked. "Truly." Jon met his eyes steadily. "Yes," he said. "Worse than any song. Worse than any battlefield. I've seen men raised again with ice in their eyes. I felt the cold when they come. It's not like winter. It's like the world forgetting how to be alive." Robb absorbed that, his jaw working. He looked down at his hands, at the faint scars along his knuckles. "I went south for vengeance," he said. "For father, for Winterfell, for us all. I thought if I could just break the Lannisters, everything would be set right again. Turns out vengeance doesn't rebuild burned farms or feed hungry mouths. It doesn't mend walls or warm beds." He looked back up. "You did that. While I was bleeding the Riverlands dry, you were here, making sure there would be anything left to come home to." Jon shifted, uncomfortable under the praise. "I had help," he said. "The lords, Sansa, Davos, the wildlings." "Somewhere along the way," Robb said, "everyone started calling me king and forgot I was just Ned Stark's son trying to do what seemed right at the time." A wry smile touched his mouth. "Then again, that's all a king ever is, when you strip the songs away." He drew a breath that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "I didn't come here to fight you, Jon," he said. "I came because when I read your letter, for the first time in a long time I saw a road that didn't end in a grave or a throne. I saw options, a way to stand with you instead of against you." Jon's throat felt tight. "What are you saying?" Robb stepped around the desk, moving into the open space between them. The firelight limned the edges of his face, casting half of it into shadow. "I'm saying," he said quietly, "that the North needs one king, not two, and that after everything I've done and failed to do, I'm not sure I'm the one who should wear the crown." Jon's throat felt tight. "I don't want it," he said, voice almost a whisper. "I didn't either," Robb replied. "And yet," he spread his hands, "here we are." Robb moved before Jon could fully grasp what he was doing. One moment he stood with his shoulders squared, the young wolf still in the set of his jaw. The next he was dropping to one knee on Ned Stark's worn stone floor. The sound of it, a dull thud as his knee struck the cold stone, echoed in Jon's skull. "Robb," Jon said, shock ripping through him. Robb bowed his head. His right hand went to the sword at his hip, drawing it in a slow, deliberate motion. The blade whispered against the leather scabbard, then flashed as it caught the firelight. He reversed it in his grip and held it up, hilt first, toward Jon. "Before gods and men," Robb said, voice steady, "I, Robb Stark of Winterfell, once king in the north, lay down my crown and bend the knee to you, Jon Snow, Jon Stark, if that's the name the North will have for you. I do this not from fear or defeat, but because I believe the North needs one hand on the tiller, and that hand should be yours." Every word seemed to hammer a nail into some unseen scaffolding around Jon's heart, building something he had never asked for but could no longer deny was there. "Stop," Jon said, throat tight. "Get up. You don't have to." "I do," Robb said, looking up now. His eyes were bright, not with tears but with a fierce, almost defiant determination. "If I don't, this house will tear itself apart over which of us is taller in the songs. I won't be the cause of that. I won't be the king who split the North in two because he couldn't set down a piece of metal." He pushed the sword a little closer. The hilt was worn where his hands had gripped it through battle after battle. The leather darkened with sweat and blood. "I swore to protect the North," he said. "This is how I keep that vow. By giving my strength to the man who can do what I could not." Jon looked at Sansa, as if hoping she might step in, declare this some cruel jest. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling, a strange, aching thing. "He's right," she said softly. "You know he is." Ghost rose, padding closer. Grey Wind did too. The two direwolves stood side by side, watching their humans enact a ritual older than any banner in the North. Jon felt the air in the room change, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. In his mind's eye he saw Ned Stark sitting at the same desk, heard his voice speaking low but firm about duty, about the things a man must do even when they break him. He stepped forward. His hands shook as he reached out, not to take the sword at first, but to grasp Robb's forearm. "Stand," he said. Robb's brows drew together. "If you refuse." "I'm not refusing," Jon said, "but I won't have you kneeling alone before me like some beaten supplicant." He tightened his grip, hauling Robb up. Robb rose, eyes widening with surprise. Jon took the sword then. It felt heavy in his hand, the weight of 100 charges and retreats, of commands given and obeyed. "I accept," Jon said, the words tasting like iron. "Your oath, your strength, your counsel. But hear me, Robb, if I am king, then you are no mere bannerman. You are my brother in truth if not in law. You'll stand at my right hand as Warden of the Trident, if you'll have it, and as my war commander when steel must be drawn." A startled laugh escaped Robb, half-choked. "You'd make me your captain? After I've just admitted I'm not fit to be king? Being a poor king doesn't mean you're a poor commander," Jon said, a hint of dry humor threading through his gravity. "You've won more battles than I have, and you know the South in ways I don't. I'd be a fool not to use that." Robb stared at him for a long heartbeat, then slowly, incredulously, he grinned. It was smaller than the boyhood grin Jon remembered, tempered by years and loss, but it was real. "You always were hopeless," Robb said. "Even now, you can't just take something without offering more in return." "I learned that from Father," Jon said. "He never took a man's knee without giving him a place to stand after." Sansa exhaled shakily. "Well," she said, "at least the bards will have to work for this one. The king who bent and the king who rose. They'll tie themselves in knots trying to make it all sound simpler than it is." Robb laughed, a short, surprised sound. Jon found himself answering with a huff of breath that might one day be laughter again. "Do we tell them?" Robb asked, sobering. "The lords, the men. They'll want to see it, I suppose. Their fallen king kneeling and their new one lifting him up. That's the sort of thing they can wrap their tongues around. We tell them, Jon said, but we do it our way. He glanced at Sansa. In the Great Hall, with witnesses, and with our words, not theirs. Then we should go, Sansa said, before the rumors outrun the truth. They're already galloping around the yard as we speak. Robb sheathed his sword with a decisive movement. Jon handed it back, their fingers brushing. When I ride south with your banners at my back, Robb said, sobering again, it'll be as your man, not as some half-king clinging to old glory. Are you ready for that, Jon? For what it means to have me speaking in your name in places you've never seen. Jon thought of King's Landing, of the Red Keep looming over a reeking city. He thought of the twins and the Freys, of the Reach and the Stormlands, all the tangled web of loyalties and grudges he had only heard about in scraps. No, he said honestly, I'm not ready for any of this. He lifted his chin. But I'll learn, with you at my side. Robb nodded once, sharply, a pact sealed without ink. They did it properly, because half-measures in such matters were invitations for 100 conflicting tales. The great hall, cleared and swept, filled again with lords and captains, with men who had followed Robb south and those who had stayed to fight alongside Jon. The air was thick, anticipation and curiosity layered over the ever-present smells of smoke and cooked meat. Jon sat on the high seat, the direwolf heads snarling at either side of his shoulders. The circlet that passed for a crown in the north rested heavy on his brow, its simple dark metal at odds with the churning knot in his stomach. Sansa stood to his right, a living embodiment of Winterfell's memory, while Ser Davos took a place to his left, looking as uncomfortable with the pomp as Jon felt. Robb stood below the dais, facing the hall. He'd shed his travel-stained cloak for one of plain gray wool, the dire wolf of his house embroidered at the shoulder. His sword hung at his hip. For a moment he simply looked, his gaze traveling over the faces turned toward him. He saw men who'd followed him through ambush and siege, who'd bled for him at the Whispering Wood and Oxcross. He saw others whose sons had never come back from those battles. Men who'd sworn to him as their only king and then, while he was still gathering his strength in the south, had sworn again to another. He did not hate them for it. He did not quite forgive them either. But standing here in Ned Stark's hall, he found he could understand them in a way he hadn't when he'd first heard of Jon's crowning in some muddy camp surrounded by strangers dead. The North had not betrayed him, he thought. It had simply done what it had to do to survive. He turned toward Jon and climbed the first step of the dais. The room seemed to hush, the crackle of the fire and the shuffle of feet fading. Men of the North, Robb said, voice carrying clearly. You named me king once. I took that mantle and did my best to wear it. I won battles. I made mistakes. I thought breaking the South would heal the North's wounds. I was wrong. A low murmur ran through the hall, but no one spoke above it. When Winterfell burned, Robb went on. I was hundreds of leagues away, chasing Lannisters. When the Boltons carved your sons, I was nowhere near to stop them. When the Ironborn raided your coasts, I was fighting for a river I'd never seen before this war. I was the king in the North in name, but the man who saved your homes, who took back these walls, who bled on northern snow when you needed him, stands behind me now. He turned then, slowly, to face Jon. For an instant, their eyes met, an entire lifetime of shared childhood and divergent paths hanging between them. Then Robb went to one knee. The sound of it landing on stone rang out again, sharp in the silent hall. My lords, he said, not taking his eyes from Jon's. Before you all, I lay down the crown you once set upon my head. I bend the knee to Jon Stark, king in the North, and pledge him my sword, my banners, and my life. I will follow him where he leads, fight where he commands, and hold what lands he grants me in his name until the end of my days. The hall exhaled as one, a murmur swelling like a rising wind. Some faces were stunned, others thoughtful. A few looked angry, but even they could not quite hide the grudging respect for the starkness of the gesture. Jon rose. The circlet shifted slightly as he stood, its weight reminding him of every choice that had led to this moment. He descended the steps. Each one felt like walking deeper into a story he would never have written for himself. When he reached Robb, he did not pause. He dropped to one knee as well, mirroring his brother. The gasp that ran through the hall was almost comical in its unanimity. "I accept your oath," Jon said, voice quiet but carrying. "And in turn, I make one of my own. Before these witnesses, I swear I will not rule as some southern tyrant, jealous of every scrap of power. I will rule knowing that whatever I am, I became only because others bled and fought and believed beside me." He reached out, grasping Robb's forearm. Robb's hand closed around his in return, rough and strong. "I name you Warden of the Trident," Jon said. "Lord of the Riverlands in my name when they're one. Captain of my hosts in the south when we must ride there again. I will stand for the north against what comes from the dark. You will stand for it against what comes from men." For a heartbeat, the hall was utterly still. Then Lord Mormont thumped her fist on the table once, hard. "Good," she grunted. "That's one less fool's war we'll have to fight." Laughter broke out, rough and relieved. Lord Glover rose, raising his cup. "To the north," he shouted. "One king, 2 wolves, and may the rest of the realm tremble if they're foolish enough to try us again." Cups slammed on tables. Voices rose in a roar that shook the rafters. "The north!" they cried. "The north! The north!" Jon and Robb rose together, still clasping forearms. In that moment, amid the thunder of their people's voices, the crown's weight felt a little less crushing, its edges a little less sharp. Ghost and gray wind lifted their muzzles and howled, their voices weaving with the roar of men until it was impossible to tell where human ended and wolf began. The godswood was quiet in a way the rest of Winterfell never quite managed anymore. The noises of men and work and war fell away at its edge as if the trees themselves swallowed them. Snow lay in a thin crust on the ground, crunching underfoot as Jon and Robb walked the familiar path toward the heart tree. The weirwood loomed ahead, its pale trunk streaked with old, dried red where the sap had bled years ago. Its carved face watched them come with the same somber, slightly sorrowful expression it had worn all their lives. The red leaves whispered overhead, the faint sound like 1,000 secrets being told too softly to hear. They stopped before it. A thin, cold wind slid through the branches, finding gaps in their cloaks. Jon felt it brush his face, a reminder that however much he had changed, this place remained as it had always been, indifferent, patient, eternal. "Do you think he hears us?" Robb asked after a while, nodding toward the carved face. "Father," Jon asked. "The old gods," Robb said. "Father too, I suppose." He let out a breath. "I used to talk to them when we were boys, whisper things into the roots, mostly about wanting a bigger sword and fewer stitches." Jon smiled faintly. "I remember," he said. "You used to sneak down here at night. Thought no one saw you." "You saw everything I did," Robb said. "You always did. That was half the trouble." They fell into silence again. The godswood had a way of eating words, of making silence feel fuller than speech. "When I first wore the crown," Robb said finally, "I thought the gods must have chosen me, that there was some wisdom in it, some plan. Otherwise, why would they let the men shout my name like that? Raise me up so high?" His breath misted as he spoke. "Now I think the gods watch us the way a man watches ants on a log. Interested, maybe, but not intervening much either way." "Maybe," Jon said, "or maybe they gave us hands and hearts so we'd do the intervening ourselves." Robb glanced at him. "Spoken like a man who's had to make ugly choices and live with them. Spoken like a man Lady Melisandre keeps calling Prince this and promised that," Jon replied dryly. Robb snorted. "You and your red woman," he said. "I met her, you know, briefly. She looked at me as if she were measuring where to put the knife if she had to carve whatever prophecy she's chasing into my bones. She's not mine," Jon said reflexively, then sighed. "But she's not wrong about everything. Something is coming. Something worse than anything we've seen. All of this, He gestured vaguely, encompassing the keep, the crown, the kneeling, the acclaim. It's only worth anything if it helps us survive that. Robb nodded slowly. He reached out, brushing his fingers against the bark of the heart tree. His hand looked small against the vast, pale trunk. "I meant what I said," he said. "I'll take your banners south when the time comes. I'll break bread with Freys if I must, or break their bridges if it comes to that. I'll stand before whatever lions still prowl in the south and tell them that if they want to reach the neck, they'll have to come through me and the ghosts of every man they've already killed." His jaw clenched. "But the songs won't call me king anymore." "Songs are liars' work half the time," Jon said. "They'll twist this no matter what we do. Make it simpler or grander or crueler. We'll be the ones who have to live with the truth." Robb turned toward him. "And the truth is?" Jon considered. The heart tree's red eyes seemed to bore into him, as if demanding something more than easy words. "The truth is that you did what few kings ever do," Jon said. "You chose your people over your pride. You set down the crown before it could be torn from you along with your head. You came home when home needed you, instead of staying away out of stubbornness." He met Robb's gaze. "The truth is that whatever they call me, I'll never forget that you made it possible for me to be anything at all. That matters more than whether some drunk minstrel rhymes snow with woe in a tavern song." Robb huffed a laugh. "They'll rhyme it with crow, surely," he said. "Or foe. Or king," Jon said, making a face. "They'll force it if they have to." They stood there, two sons of Ned Stark, before the tree where he had once stood with them, his hands resting heavy and warm on their shoulders. The memory was so strong Jon could almost feel it, the weight of guidance that had once seemed unshakable. "I missed you," Robb said quietly, "more than I let myself think about. There were nights, after a battle, when I'd dream you were still at the wall, that I'd ride up there one day just for the hell of it, to see you in black and laugh at you freezing your arse off while I told you about courts and lords and all the southern nonsense you'd escaped." "You still can," Jon said. "Not the wall part. That's complicated now. But you can still ride up there. See what I saw." "I think I'll be seeing enough of the South again soon," Robb said. "Someone has to make the rest of the realm understand that when winter comes, it won't care whose banner flies over which tower." He turned fully, facing Jon. "We'll do this," he said. "Your way. We'll hold the North together. I'll keep the South from eating us alive while you keep the dead from doing the same. Between us, maybe there'll be something left when the snows melt." Jon extended his hand. Robb took it without hesitation. Their grip was firm, equal. "Two wolves," Robb said. "One crown." Jon looked up at the heart tree's pale face. Snow melted on his lashes, blurring the red leaves into a steady crimson drip. "Let the gods and the dead and the South see," he said. "Winterfell stands. The North stands. We stand." Somewhere deep in the wood, a raven croaked, its harsh cry carrying through the branches like a ragged answer. The wind shifted, bringing with it the distant clatter of training in the yard, the murmur of men's voices, the creak of leather and wood. Life, stubborn and loud against the encroaching snow. The two brothers stood beneath the weirwood, their shadows merging on the frozen ground, and for the first time in a long while, Jon felt that the North might yet survive what was coming. Not on the strength of one man and his crown, but on the bond of two wolves who had chosen, despite everything, to stand together. The map of the world, as far as the Starks were concerned, began and ended with the North. It sprawled across the heavy oak of Ned Stark's war table, rivers and forests inked in careful strokes, little wooden tokens marking keeps and crossings like pieces in some grim game. Jon Snow stared down at it, hands braced on either side of the parchment. The candlelight that puddled over the painted land made the riverlines gleam like fresh cuts. "Food first," Ser Davos Seaworth was saying, tapping a blunt finger on the area around White Harbor. "We can talk of kings and walkers and dragons until our tongues freeze, but if we don't fill granaries, we'll all be too busy starving to swing a sword at anything. We've been sending men to the fishing villages for weeks. Lord Wyman Manderley rumbled from his place near the corner of the table. The chair he sat on creaked under his bulk. My ships bring in what they can. But if winter's as long as the old tales say, we'll need more. We should send to the Vale to the south, and trust southern grain to keep northern bellies from caving? Lyanna Mormont cut across him, small and sharp as a knife. The bare sigil on her breast seemed almost larger than she was. We have our own stores, Manderley. My islands ready for winter are yours. Some of us had our lands burned by more than snow, Manderley said, eyes narrowing. When you've had Lannister gold turn your fields to ash and iron-born axes chop your barns to splinters, little lady, you may find your larders emptier than your pride. Enough, Jon said. The word was not loud, but it carried. The room settled, the Lord's scowls turning toward him. We'll need all of it, Jon went on. Northern grain, southern grain, fish from the seas and roots from the frozen ground. Ser Davos is right. Winter won't care whose sigil is over the storehouse door. You speak of winter as if it's a man, Wyman said. Jon met his gaze. I've seen things in the snow that walked like men, he said quietly. Winter has teeth. We'd do well to remember that. A silence followed, uneasy as a horse scenting smoke. Robb cleared his throat, drawing their eyes to him. He stood with his hands resting lightly on the edge of the table, his posture easy but his jaw tight. We have 2 storms coming, he said. One from beyond the wall, one from the south. We can't ignore either. If we pull everything north and leave the Riverlands and the Neck to fend for themselves, we'll have Lannister or Frey banners flying over Moat Cailin before the ground is fully frozen. And if that happens, every wagon heading this way will be a battle just to get through. The Neck is ours, came a soft voice from near the wall. Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater, had arrived the day before with a mere handful of men, his presence more important than his numbers. He had slipped into the room without fuss, as silent as mist over the marshes. It has been since your father's time and long before. Robb inclined his head. I don't doubt you, Lord Reed, but if the South presses, they'll find ways. They always do. Better we have a Stark host at our half of the choke point to meet them. He glanced at Jon. There was deference in it now, not the wary measuring from their first meeting. You made me Warden of the Trident, Robb said. Let me go there. Let me plant our banners again in the Riverlands and make it clear that if anyone wants to come north, they'll have to ask permission first. And you think the lords there will simply open their gates? Sansa asked, one hand resting lightly on the table. Her eyes moved over the map as if she could see the people living beneath its ink. The Freys? The stragglers of the Lannister host. I think they're tired, Robb said. Tired of being trampled by every army that passes. If I come not to claim their lands but to offer them a shield, a place in a realm that won't bleed them dry on a Lannister's whim, they might listen. Davos scratched his beard. You'd be offering them more than a shield, he said. You'd be offering them a share in your winter. Men are strange that way. They'll march cheerfully into battle with only a chance of glory, but ask them to share in someone else's hunger and they'll think twice. That's why we choose carefully which lords we invite, Sansa said. There are houses in the Riverlands who remember what our father did for them. The Blackwoods, the Mallisters, even some Frey vassals would prefer a Stark over a Frey if given the chance. And in return? Manderley asked, eyes shrewd. What do they gain, beyond the honor of freezing with us? A voice, Sansa said simply. A say in what comes after. If we survive the winter, the realm will be reshaped. Those who stood with the North when the dead came will have a place in that new order. Those who didn't. She let the words trail off, the implication clear. Jon listened, feeling the shape of the plan unfolding like a map being unrolled. Robb goes south, he said slowly, with a host strong enough to make the Freys think twice and the Riverlords think a third time. He secures the Neck and the Trident, makes sure no southern army marches north without us knowing and consenting. He tapped the top of the map, where the wall loomed like a ragged, inked scar. And I go north, he said, back to the wall. with what men we can spare. I know the wildlings. They'll answer if I call them again. They don't kneel, but they'll fight. Between us and them, we hold the line there. You'd leave Winterfell? Lina demanded. Just as we've got you crowned? Winterfell doesn't need a man in a crown, Jon said. It needs someone who can keep its halls warm and its people fed. Someone who can listen to lords without wanting to throw them all in the snow when they argue. His mouth twitched. Sansa can do that, with my lady mother at her side, if she'll stay. Lord Manderly, Lord Glover, Ser Davos for when she needs someone who's seen the South. And lived to tell of it. You'll have a council. They'll have more sense between them than I ever will. Catelyn Stark, who had been standing near the fire, watching, stepped forward. Her eyes moved from Jon to Robb to Sansa, taking measure of the span between them. I'll stay, she said. Someone needs to make sure you two don't tear the realm in half between you with your noble intentions. And someone needs to remind the lords here what Winterfell stood for before crowns and dragons and dead men came into it. Jon met her gaze, seeing in it the strain of the years and something else, a reluctant acceptance of the bastard who now wore her husband's chair. Then it's settled, he said. 2 fronts. 1 war. The words lay on the table like another piece placed, altering the game. Outside, the snow thickened, drifting against the windows in soft white waves. Winterfell's walls would hold against it, as they had for thousands of years. Whether the men within them would hold against the storms to come was another question entirely. The first light of morning turned the training yard into a world of steam and steel. Breath smoked from men and horses alike, rising in ghostly plumes that hung in the still air. The clang of steel on steel rang sharp against the stone walls, punctuated by grunts and the occasional oath. Robb slid aside as the axe came down, the blade cutting through the space his head had occupied a moment earlier to bite sparks from the packed frozen earth. His boots skidded. He caught himself with a twist, sword flashing up to tap lightly against the broad chest of the man opposite. Dead? Robb said, fighting to catch his breath. Tormund Giantsbane bared his teeth in a wolfish grin, though the point of Robb's sword rested at his sternum. The wildling's beard was a riot of red and white, stiff with frost. His eyes gleamed with amusement. Bah! Tormund snorted, stepping back and swatting the blade away with the back of his wrist. You count that as dead south of the wall? In the true north, a man fights 3 days after a poke like that before he remembers to lie down. That would explain the smell, Robb panted, but he was smiling too. Around them, a loose ring of onlookers had formed, a rough mix of northern men-at-arms in proper mail and leather, and free folk in furs and scavenged bits of armor. Some wore bones in their hair, others bits of bright cloth. More than one had a suspiciously Lannister-looking sword at his hip, taken as spoils. The Northerners eyed the wildlings with open distrust. The wildlings returned it with a sort of amused contempt, as if they were watching children playing at war. Robb had seen enough of both to know that contempt could get a man killed as surely as fear. Again, he said. Tormund laughed. That's the Stark way, is it? He asked, rolling his shoulders. Fight until your sword arm falls off, then strap it back on and fight some more? That's the Northman's way, Robb said. Stark or no. He sank back into his stance, sword held low, knees bent. Tormund hefted his axe, the weapon looking almost dainty in his massive hands. They circled. Snow crunched under their boots. Ghost and gray wind paced beyond the ring, hackles raised. Not in aggression, but in alertness. The dire wolves did not like the tension in the air. They remembered what it smelled like when men circled each other with weapons in hand. Tormund feinted left, then came in hard from the right, axe whistling. Robb met the strike, the impact shivering through his arm. He let the force carry him back, rolling his wrist to slide the axe past him. For a moment, the wildling's guard was open. Robb stepped in, shoulder checking him, sword snapping up. Tormund's elbow caught him in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Robb staggered, vision flashing white at the edges. He dropped low on instinct as the axe whistled overhead, feeling the wind of it lift his hair. His knee caught Tormund's ankle. The larger man overbalanced, swearing as he went down with a crash that shook the yard. Robb's sword kissed his throat. "Dead," Robb said again, wheezing. Silence held for a heartbeat. Then someone, Lyanna Mormont, watching with arms crossed and a look of fierce satisfaction, let out a short, sharp cheer. Others took it up, a ragged chorus. Tormund looked up the length of the blade at Robb, then threw back his head and roared with laughter. "Stark cubs got teeth," he boomed. He slapped his hand on the ground and pushed himself up, unbothered by the blade. "I've seen southern lords bleed out their arse at the sight of a proper axe swing. You at least try to dodge before you fall." "I've had practice dodging axes," Robb said. "Lannister, mostly." "Lannisters don't use axes," Tormund scoffed. "They use gold and other men's swords. Neither cuts deep if you're too stupid to step aside." He clapped Robb on the shoulder hard enough to stagger him. "I'll ride with you, young wolf," he said, loud enough for the watching northerners to hear. "You want the neck held, you want this river place kept tight, you call on Tormund Giantsbane. I'll show these green snow boys what a proper shield wall looks like." Murmurs rippled through the northern ranks. Some looked scandalized at the idea of wildlings riding with a Stark host. Others looked calculating, weighing the value of a man who could swing an axe like that and laugh afterward. Robb nodded, rubbing his shoulder. "I'll hold you to that," he said. "And we'll need more like you. Men who know how to fight in the cold. Who don't flinch when the ground's frozen stone and the wind's trying to bite their faces off. Plenty of them north of your big wall," Tormund said. His eyes flicked briefly toward Jon, who was watching from the far side of the yard, arms folded. "If your Crow King calls, they'll come. Some because they like him, some because they like fighting, all because there's nowhere else left to go if what he says is coming really comes." "And what do you think?" Robb asked. "About what he says is coming." Tormund's grin faded slightly. For a heartbeat, something older and harsher than mirth looked out of his eyes. "I think your brother's seen the true winter," he said. "And I think if you southern North folk don't listen to him, you'll get to see it too, closer than you'd like." He hefted his axe again. "Now, one more bout. This time, when I drop you, we'll see if these lords of yours know how to staunch a wound." Robb laughed, stepping back into the circle. The sound tasted strange in his mouth, half rusty, half new. He could feel eyes on him. From wildlings measuring whether this Stark was worth following, from northerners judging whether the man who had just bent the knee was still strong enough to lead them in battle. He intended to give them all the answer they needed. The air in the crypts was always cold, but it was a different cold from the bite of the northern wind. Up there, cold was a living thing that clawed at cheeks and fingers. Down here, it was the stillness of stone that had forgotten what warmth was. Jon's breath clouded faintly as he followed Melisandre's torch deeper among the rows of stone lords. The flame painted long, jerking shadows along the carved faces, making their set features seem almost to move. Names whispered past him in his mind. Brandon, Ricard, Cregan, men of legend and men of little note, all equal in the dust. Sansa walked at his side, her hand brushing the rough wall now and then as if to steady herself. She had not come down here often since returning. The weight of ghosts was different for someone who had lost so much of her childhood to faraway horrors. Melisandre paused before Ned Stark's statue. The stone likeness bore the same solemn calm it had in life, though the sword beneath his hands remained whole here, not shattered by kingly whim and betrayal. "He was not my king," Melisandre said, voice low but clear. "But he was a just man, your father. The flames told me that when I first saw him. They showed me his death, too late to save him. Fire is a cruel teacher." "You said you had something to show us," Jon said. He did not like coming down here with her, red cloth and strange jewels invading the sacred northern dark. But unease at her presence paled beside the need for any scrap of knowledge about what lay ahead. "The dead are quiet," Melisandre said, gesturing with the torch. They do not complain when I speak of other fires in their hall." She turned toward them, eyes bright as embers in the gloom. "You asked me what I saw when last I stared into the flames. I see it still when I close my eyes." She lifted the torch higher. The light licked along the faces of the stone wolves crouched at Ned's feet, making their eyes seem to glow. "I saw ice," she said, "a wall of it taller than any tower, cracking like old bone. I saw dead men walking under a sky that burned green. I saw a great beast of fire and shadow fall screaming into the snow. And I saw you, Jon Snow, standing before them with a sword in your hand that burned like the sun." Sansa's breath hitched softly beside him. Jon felt his jaw tighten. "You've told me this before," he said. "You told me I was some prince, some hero. I've died once already for your prophecies. I won't be led to another death on the strength of images in a fire." Melisandre inclined her head slightly, as if accepting the rebuke. "I was wrong about the man once," she said. "I chased Stannis Baratheon across half a continent, believing him to be the one promised. I forged kings in fire and darkness, and he burned for it. I bear those ashes on my soul." She stepped closer, torches casting her sharp features into relief. "But I was not wrong about the war," she went on. "Only about which man would stand at its heart." Sansa spoke, her voice echoing faintly in the stone chamber. "And what of the rest of us?" she asked. "Your visions are always of one man with a sword. What of those who stand beside him without fire in their hands? Are we just shapes in the smoke to you?" Melisandre's eyes shifted to her. Something like respect flickered there. "The flames love a figure," she said. "They cling to the edges of a story. One man, one sword, one victory. But fire is a liar as much as it is a truth-teller. It doesn't show the hands that steady the sword, the voices that keep the man from walking off a cliff in his zeal." She tilted her head. "I see you more often than you think, Lady Sansa. Standing in halls of stone while men shout, your voice the single thread that keeps them from pulling everything down." Sansa's mouth tightened. "I don't want their stories," she said. "I want their swords pointed the right way and their walls standing when the snow melts." Melisandre smiled faintly. "Then we are not so different." Jon stepped between them, not wanting this moment to become another of Melisandre's tests. "You saw the wall cracking," he said. "You saw dead men under a green sky. How long?" Melisandre closed her eyes briefly, as if listening to some sound only she could hear. "Time is a mist in the flames," she said. "It curls and twists, but the cold presses closer each night. The wall will not hold forever, Jon Snow. Whatever vows men shouted at its feet, it was not built for this. We're sending men north," Jon said. "I'll go myself. We'll strengthen it, find what's left of the Watch, rally the wildlings. We'll not sit here and wait for it to fall on our heads." "You will go," she agreed, "and you will hold for a time. But there will come a night when fire and ice will meet upon those stones, and the wall will be not a barrier, but a battleground." Jon looked up at his father's stone face. The carved eyes stared past him, as if fixed on some distant horizon. "If that's where I have to stand," he said quietly, "I'll stand there, but I won't stand alone." He thought of Robb, of their clasped forearms in the hall, of the roar of the north around them, of Sansa's steady gaze on the balcony, of Tormund's laughter, Lyanna's fierce scowl, Davos's weary, stubborn counsel, of wildlings and Northmen and river lords yet to be brought into the fold. "No," Melisandre said softly, "you will not. That is what the flames do not show clearly. They burn too bright around you, but in the cracks I see shapes. Wolves and women with iron in their spines, and men whose hands smell of salt and smoke. Remember that when you feel alone before the snow, Jon Snow." Sansa's hand brushed his sleeve, a brief, grounding touch. "We'll hold Winterfell," she said. "We'll hold the neck. Go to your wall. Talk to your dead. When the time comes, send word. We'll answer." Jon nodded once, feeling the promise settle on his shoulders alongside the weight of his cloak and crown. He looked at Ned Stark's statue one last time, at the sword across its lap. "Watch over us," he murmured, to old gods and dead fathers alike. "We're going to need it." The neck smelled of wet earth and slow water, of rotting vegetation and hidden life. It was a different kind of wild from the harsh, clean cold of the north. Here, the air clung to skin, heavy and damp, and the ground could not be trusted. What looked like solid earth might swallow a man to the waist if he stepped wrong. Robb Stark reined in at the edge of the marsh, his horse snorting and stamping as its hooves sank slightly into the soft ground. Gray Wind stood nearby, paws splayed, nostrils flaring as he tasted the air. The direwolf did not like this place. The scents were all wrong. Too many things hiding, too much water muting the smells he relied on. Brynden Tully, the blackfish, sat his horse with the ease of long habit, his one good eye scanning the reeds. "Feels like a place that doesn't want us," he muttered. "It rarely does," came a calm voice. A small boat slid out from between the rushes, so quietly that Robb almost missed its approach. It was low and narrow, carved from a single trunk, and it held a single man, Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater. He stood in the boat as if he'd grown from its wood, long pole in hand, guiding it with lazy, practiced pushes. He looked much as he had in Winterfell, though here his presence seemed to swell, the marsh itself lending him a kind of authority. His clothes were muted greens and browns, mottled and damp. His hair was threaded with silver reeds, his eyes as still and deep as the water around him. "Lord Reed," Robb called. "Robb Stark," Howland replied. "Or should I call you Lord of the Trident now, Warden?" The names seemed to multiply faster than the frogs in my marsh. "Robb is fine," Robb said. Titles felt heavy and awkward in his mouth these days. "You received our ravens?" "I did," Howland said. He eased the boat closer until the prow nudged against a tuft of firmer ground. "I've seen stranger things in the green dreams than a king kneeling to his brother, but not many." He stepped lightly from the boat to the soggy bank, balancing as if the treacherous ground were as solid as stone. Crannogmen appeared in the reeds behind him, as if called up by his movement. Men and women both, small and wiry, faces daubed with mud that broke up their outlines, eyes sharp and watchful. Gray Wind growled, low and uncertain. The Crannogmen did not flinch. They regarded him with the same measuring gaze they turned on Robb's men. "We're marching south," Robb said. "To the Trident, to the twins. Jon wants the neck held. I wanted to speak with you before we moved men through your lands." Howland tilted his head slightly. "The neck has always been held," he said. "By us, by the water, by the frogs and the will-o'-wisps, but I understand." He glanced over Robb's shoulder at the northern host, their banners hanging limp in the damp air. "The ground ahead of you is not friendly. You'll need solid paths, dry as they can be made." "I don't intend to drag half the north into your marshes," Robb said. "Most of my men will take the King's Road, such as it is, but I'd like to send smaller companies through your ways. Scout ahead. Harass any southern host that thinks to come north without an invitation." Howland's mouth twitched. "The Lannisters never cared much for invitations," he said. "Nor the Freys, for that matter. I can help you bleed them if they come. The neck is made for that work." He took a step closer, his gaze sharpening. "You carry more than your own pride now," he said. "I can see it on you. Your father wore it the same way. A man can be crushed by that weight if he tries to carry it alone." "I don't plan to," Robb said. "I've got Jon, Sansa, the lords who stayed or returned. You." Howland smiled faintly at the last word. "Careful, boy," he said. "Ask too much of a bog and you'll sink." His eyes flicked briefly northward. "Your brother asked me to send some of my people to the wall. Quiet eyes and hands, for when the dead walk where boots can't go. I've already done it." Robb filed that away. He trusted Jon's judgment on such matters far more than his own. The wall is as foreign to him as the Red Keep had once been. Both were places where power gathered and history clung like leeches. "You knew my father better than most," Robb said on impulse. "Before I was born, at the Tower of Joy." Howland's gaze sharpened. For a heartbeat, something old and sorrowful flickered across his features, like a stone breaking the surface of a still pond. "Old stories," he said. "Old stories that seem to matter more with every raven," Robb said. "Men whisper about Jon's name, about Rhaegar Targaryen and my Aunt Lyanna. They whisper that he has more claim to Winterfell and more to the Iron Throne itself than I ever did." He expected anger or denial. Instead, Howland looked at him with something like pity. "Claim," the Crannog Lord said quietly, "is a strange word. Men use it to mean what I can take and hold. Blood is a part of it. So is steel. So is the will of the people who have to live with whatever man sits a chair carved for killing." He put the butt of his pole down, leaning on it. "Your brother has dragon's blood in him, yes," he said. "And wolf's. He has ice and fire both, in ways that make red women's eyes burn and old men's hearts quail. Your father broke half the realm to hide that truth, not because he feared what Jon might become, but because he feared what men would try to make him be." Robb swallowed. The fog seemed to creep closer, carrying the weight of those words. "And what do you think," he asked, "of what Jon should be?" Howland Reed looked north again, toward where Winterfell lay beyond the horizon, and beyond that, the wall. "I think," he said, "that the boy I saw once in Winterfell's yard, brooding in the snow while you swung your wooden sword, never cared about crowns. He cared about doing what was right, even when it hurt him. If the realm is lucky, that hasn't changed." He met Robb's gaze. "You gave him your knee, he said. "Not because prophecy said you must, but because you chose to. That is worth more than any bloodline whispered over a dying man." He turned away then, raising his hand. The Crannogmen melted back into the reeds, their boat sliding silent as thought across the water. "I'll send guides," Howland said. "They'll show you paths that don't exist on your maps. They'll teach your men how to walk on moss without sinking, how to strike from water and vanish. When the time comes, they'll slow the south for you. That's what the Neck has always done." He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "And when the dead come," he said, "send word. Bogs hold bones very well." Robb watched him go until the reeds swallowed boat and man alike. The marsh resumed its slow, secret life, as if the brief interruption by armored men and great gray wolves had been no more than a passing breeze. He turned his horse's head south. The road ahead was long and muddied, but for the first time, he felt something like a plan beneath his hooves, a path that led somewhere other than a battlefield and an unmarked grave. The wall rose from the land like the spine of some ancient, frozen beast. Jon had forgotten, in the months since he'd left it, how small it could make a man feel. Standing on its top, with the wind screaming across the icy expanse and the darkness stretching endless beyond, he felt once again like the boy who had first ridden the creaking cage up its face, heart lodged somewhere between his teeth and his feet. "Could have stayed in your warm castle," Dolorous Ed muttered beside him, cloak snapping like a torn sail in the wind. "Plenty of fires there, beds, roofs that don't try to kill you with falling ice every other day. But no, you had to come back to this blessed pile of frozen misery." Jon's breath smoked in the air. "Nice to see you too, Ed," he said. Ed hunched deeper into his furs. "I keep telling myself that," he said. "Nice to see him. Nice to see the crow who got himself killed and then came back just in time to hand us all over to wildlings in winter." He glanced up, eyes half-lidded against the wind. "I must like you. It's the only explanation. I've never suffered so much for people I didn't." Tormund Giantsbane stood on Jon's other side, squinting into the dark. The wind tugged at his beard, trying to pluck it from his face. "You see that?" he rumbled, nodding toward the forest below. Jon followed his gaze. At first he saw only the usual, a sea of black treetops, moving like water when the wind gusted. Then, faint and flickering, he saw it. A smear of unnatural green far out among the trunks, pulsing like a distant heartbeat. "Wildfire," he said, bile rising in his throat. He had seen it once before, from a distance, lighting the Blackwater with its hellish glow. "Aye," Tormund said. "You Southerners burn your enemies with strange things. We preferred good old-fashioned fire. Warmer, less likely to explode when you sneeze near it." Ed made a face. "Thought that stuff was all down in King's Landing," he said, "between the Queen and her mad priests." "Not anymore," Jon said. "Word is Cersei Lannister burned half her city with it. It wouldn't surprise me if some of it found its way north, one way or another. There are always men willing to sell the means to burn the world, if it buys them a nicer chair to sit on while it does." He stared at the green flares. They were distant, too distant to threaten the wall directly. But they were there, in the haunted forest where only dead things and desperate men ventured. "You think it's them?" Tormund asked quietly. "The walkers. They don't need fire," Jon said. "They are the cold." He shook his head. "Could be some poor band of wildlings trying to keep warm with something they stole and don't understand. Could be deserters from some southern army, too far north and too stupid to turn back. Could be a sign," Melisandre's voice said softly from behind them. Jon turned. He still was not used to seeing her on the wall, her red robes an obscene slash of color against the white and black. Her hair whipped around her face, eyes reflecting the torch flames with an inner light. "Of what?" he asked. "Of fire walking into the cold," she said. "Of men bringing their own doom against them. Wildfire burns hot and fast. It eats air and flesh alike. If someone carries it into the domain of the dead." She let the thought trail off, a smirk at the corner of her mouth. "The flames didn't show me that clearly. They rarely bother with sensible warnings. We sent a party out," Ed said, "before you got here. 5 men. 1 of Tormund's, 4 of ours. We haven't seen them since." The wind seemed to howl louder for a moment, as if in answer. Jon gripped the icy stone. "We need to know what's out there," he said. "If someone's playing with wildfire in the woods, they'll light half the forest. If it's the dead," he exhaled, "we can't have them anywhere near that stuff." "You want to ride out?" Ed asked. "Into that?" He gestured toward the flickering green. "Yes," Jon said. Ed sighed. "Of course you do. Why stay safe on a perfectly good gigantic wall when you can go galloping toward screaming green death in the dark? If you ever have children, Snow, I pity them. They'll never be allowed to sit still long enough to learn to read." Tormund's teeth flashed. "I'll go," he said. "My people know those woods better than any crow. If there's something wrong out there, we'll smell it before you do." "I'm not sending you alone," Jon said. "You'll take some of our best. Not boys with shaking hands. Men who've seen them before, who won't run at the first cold wind." "And you?" Tormund asked. Jon hesitated. The urge to ride out himself, to put eyes on whatever hell was brewing in the trees, was strong. But he had come back to the wall to be more than a sword. He had an army's worth of wildlings and ragged black brothers to weld into something that could stand. "No," he said slowly. "Not this time. If something happens to you, there are other free folk chiefs. If something happens to me, this all falls apart." He hated the truth of it even as he spoke it. Tormund grunted. "You're learning, Crow," he said. "I liked you better when you were dumber. Easier to talk you into stupid fights." He clapped Jon's shoulder, nearly knocking him sideways. "I'll bring you back a story," he said. "Or not come back at all. Either way, you'll have an answer." As Tormund strode away to gather his men, Jon looked down again at the distant, unnatural glow. For a long moment, he imagined it snuffed out, swallowed by snow and darkness. Then he imagined it spreading, catching on dry branches, running along the forest like spilled blood. Fire and ice, racing to see which would consume the world first. He turned his back on the sight, facing south. Somewhere, beyond leagues of pine and stone and snow, Winterfell stood, its chimneys smoking, its yard echoing with the ring of steel as men trained. Beyond that, the neck and Robb and the slow grind of southern puh. Lydics. One war at a time, he told himself. Hold here. Trust your brother to hold there. The wall crouched beneath his boots, ancient and implacable. For the first time, Jon wondered not if it would hold, but what would be left of it when the war was done. The twins had never been beautiful. They were ugly castles squatting on either side of a muddy river, tied together by stone and spite. When Robb had first ridden through their gates, he'd seen only the tactical value, the choke point, the bridge, the solid walls. Now, standing in the Frey's great hall with the smell of blood thick in his nose, he saw the rot that had always been there, masked by stone and banners. The hall was a chaos of overturned benches and scattered weapons. The long tables lay askew, platters of greasy meat and bowls of congealed stew spilled across the rushes. Frey men lay where they'd fallen, some groaning, some still. Others knelt, hands on their heads, guarded by northern spears and crannogmen with notched arrows at the ready. Robb's sword dripped, bright in the torchlight. Sweat trickled down his spine beneath his mail. His breath came hard, but his stance was steady. At the far end of the hall, on a chair that aspired to be a throne and failed, sat Walder Frey. The Lord of the Crossing looked smaller than Robb remembered, shrunken inside his layered robes. His watery eyes flicked from Robb's face to the sword, to the men around them. His mouth wore its habitual sneer, but there was a tremor in his jaw. "You dare," Walder rasped. "You dare come into my hall with steel drawn. After the insult you've already done my house, boy, you think you can?" "After the insult I did your house," Robb cut in, his voice hard. "You mean the broken betrothal. The one I would have mended with apologies and oaths, if you'd given me the chance. You didn't want amends. You wanted a pretext." He gestured with his sword at the hall. "You wanted this." The old man's lips twisted. "You were a king," he spat. "You thought yourself above your word, above my daughters, above me. I thought," Robb said, "that honor could bend enough to make room for love. I was wrong, and men died for it. My men, your men, river lords who had nothing to do with our bargain." His grip tightened on the hilt. "But you did more than take offense. You plotted their deaths. You sent riders north to stir trouble while I was away. You opened your gates to Lannister gold, then shut them on those who dared to refuse." Wyman Manderly shifted his bulk beside Robb, eyes gleaming. "We have letters," he rumbled. "Codes broken, couriers caught. You should have burned your quills as well as your bridges, Lord Frey. Ink leaves a trail as sharp as blood." Tormund chuckled from the other side, leaning on his axe. "You Southerners," he said. "So much time writing about what you're going to do instead of just doing it. Makes it easier to hang you with your own words later." Walder's gaze darted between them. "This is my hall," he said. "My castle. You have no right to judge me in it." "If not here, then where?" Robb asked. "In some northern yard you never had the courage to ride to? On a field where our banners could meet and you could see the men you fed to Lannister swords." He took a step forward. Gray wind padded silently at his heels, low growl thrumming through the floorboards. "You had a chance to be more than the butt of songs about late arrivals and too many sons," Robb said. "You could have been the lord who stood with the North when the South showed its teeth. Instead you chose to be their dog. You bit when they told you to, and like a dog you'll answer for it." A murmur ran through the hall. Some of the kneeling Freys flinched, others glared. Younger sons looked more afraid than defiant. Older ones hid behind bluster. Walder's hands shook on the arms of his chair. "You think killing me will change anything?" he hissed. "You think the Trident will love you for it? You're a fool. They'll remember you as the boy who came to a peaceful hall with armed men and slaughter. I'll be the wronged lord in their songs." "Maybe," Robb said. "Or maybe they'll remember the bridge you held like a knife to their throats for a generation. The insults you flung at every house that needed your crossing. The way you let Lannister steal into your gates and sent it north into their fields." He raised his voice, letting it carry. "Hear me," he said. "I am Robb Stark, Warden of the Trident, by the will of Jon Stark, King in the North. I come not as a conquering king, but as the sword of a realm that's tired of being carved up by men like Walder Frey. This house betrayed its oaths not once, but a dozen times over. It plotted to turn this crossing into a butcher's hall. He leveled his sword at Walder. For that, I strip him of his lordship. Gasps curses. Somewhere, a crockery plate shattered as someone's grip slipped. You can't, Walder sputtered. I can, Robb said. Because every man here who still has a sword in his hand has chosen to listen to me instead of you. He glanced at Wyman. Lord Manderley, you've always had a taste for justice. Wyman's smile was slow and hungry. My lord, you'll oversee the transition, Robb said. The crossing will be held by a different Frey. One who can swear the oaths his grandsire spat on and mean them. We'll take hostages to Winterfell. The rest of the family can prove their loyalty with food and men. Or they can choose to follow Walder into ruin. He looked back at the old man. As for you, for a heartbeat, the temptation to simply swing the sword was strong. One stroke, one less snake in the grass. But Jon's voice in the godswood came back to him. We will not rule like southern tyrants, jealous of every scrap of power. We will rule knowing others bled and fought beside us. Take him down, Robb said instead. Chain him. He can rot in his own dungeon until he dies. Let the men who have to walk these halls be reminded of what he brought them to. Walder screeched as hands seized him, dragging him from his chair. The sound scratched at Robb's nerves, but he held fast. When the old man was gone, swallowed by the press of guards and kin, Robb lowered his sword. His arm. His mind ached more. You're getting soft, Tormund murmured, almost approving. The Robb I heard about in the tales would have lopped his head off and stuck it on the bridge. Maybe, Robb said, or maybe the tales just left out the parts that didn't fit the song. Wyman snorted. We'll sing new ones, he said. Ones that say the Lord of the Crossing lived long enough to hear the footsteps of every man he'd ever failed rattling his cell door. Robb looked up at the broken Frey banners hanging crooked along the walls. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine different colors there. Wolves alongside trouts, perhaps, or even the bare green of the neck, if Howland Reed ever deigned to plant his sigil on stone instead of water. Send ravens, he said, to the river lords, to the Vale if they'll listen. Tell them the twins are open. Tell them there's a Stark at the crossing who'd rather build than bleed them. He sheathed his sword. The sound of steel sliding home was, for once, louder than the memory of men screaming. The raven looked as if it had flown straight through a storm made of knives. Its feathers were ragged, tipped with frost, and one wing drooped oddly as it shifted on the back of the carved chair. Its beady eyes flicked nervously from one face to another as if unsure which of these tall, firelit shapes might decide to wring its neck. Jon stroked its breast once, gently, then turned his attention back to the scrap of parchment in his hand. The edges were blackened, one corner half burnt away. The ink had run where snowmelt had seeped into the fibers, blurring some words into meaningless smears. What does it say? Sansa asked, her voice low but carrying to the high table. Jon squinted at the cramped script, holding it closer to the nearest candle. It's from the wall, he said. From Ed, or whoever he forced to hold the quill for him. He cleared his throat. To King Jon, he read. He underlined King 3 times, then scratched it out and wrote Your Grace instead. Things are as well as you'd expect, which is to say terrible. We sent Tormund and 5 men east to investigate green fire in the woods. For days later, the fire went out. 3 days after that, Tormund came back with half a beard, 1 fewer man, and a story I wish was worse, because then it might not be true. He paused, scanning ahead. The hall had grown quieter, the low murmur of conversations fading as more eyes turned toward the high table. It wasn't wildfire, Jon continued. Or not only. Someone down south lit something bright and foolish in the forest. But the dead came to see it. They walked into the flames like they were summer rain. Men tried to burn them, didn't take. Fire slowed them, but it didn't stop them. Tormund says he saw one walk out of the blaze with its bones glowing like banked coals and its eyes as blue as the heart of winter. A choked curse escaped one of the lords further down the table. Catelyn's hand tightened on her cup until the knuckles blanched. Jon's chest felt tight. He'd seen them fall to fire before, seen them crumble when their blue light went out. The idea of them walking through it like mist made something cold and hollow open in his gut. "We held them off," he read on. "Lost 2 men. One rose again before we could burn him. Tormund broke its neck. It didn't help much. Fire still worked in the end. But they're learning, Jon. Or someone's teaching them. The big one, the king you spoke of, he was there. Didn't show himself close. But Tormund says the air itself froze when he came near, like breathing knives. If they're near wildfire, they'll find a way to use it. That's what I'd do, if I were made of ice and hate." Sansa's fingers curled against the tabletop. "They're learning," she whispered. Catelyn's eyes were fixed on Jon's face, reading the strain there as easily as she'd once read her son's mischief. "I'm not a clever man," Jon read. "You know that. If I were, I'd never have taken the black in the first place. But even a fool can see we're running out of ways to hold them back. Send whatever men you can spare. Send fire, too. Real fire, not this mad green shit. And send someone who knows how to make Southron kings listen. Because if those idiots keep playing with wildfire in their back gardens while the dead are watching, we'll all be glowing blue before long." He let the parchment drop slightly. The hall was very quiet now. Even the fire seemed to have diminished, its crackles subdued. "Yours in endless misery," he finished softly. "Ed, P.S. tell Tormund his beard will never recover. This, more than the dead, has broken him." The faintest breath of laughter stirred at the end, a nervous exhalation. It died quickly. Jon folded the parchment carefully and set it on the table. His fingers left faint marks on the damp edges. "How many men can you spare?" Catelyn asked, her voice steady. It was not the question of a mother worrying for her son, though he could see that beneath it. It was a lady of Winterfell asking her king how deeply he could dip into the well of their strength before it ran dry. "Not as many as I'd like," Jon said. "More than is comfortable." But comfort went south with the last summer. He looked down the table. Lords met his gaze and did not look away, though some needed to straighten their shoulders first. "We hold the neck," he said. "Robb has the trident. The Vale is quiet, for now, and the Freys are under watch. We can spare 2,000. 3 if we stretch our food." "And if the South decides to march while you're gone?" Lord Glover asked. "If Cersei sends her hosts north again, or this dragon queen everyone keeps whispering about lands on our shores? Then they'll find Winterfell held," Sansa said before Jon could answer. "They'll find Stark banners on the walls and northern spears at the gate. They'll find the neck a tangle of reeds and knives, the trident bristling with wolf and trout and bear. We can't fight every battle alone. That's why we're doing this in pieces." Jon nodded. "The wall is where they'll break first," he said. "If it falls, it doesn't matter how many men we have here. The dead will roll over the neck like fog. We have to strengthen it. We have to show the men there that they're not forgotten." Lord Manderly grunted. "My ships can carry men north as easily as south," he said. "We'll run provisions up to Eastwatch and Castle Black. Salt, fish, grain, whatever we can. If the dead want to crawl down from the wall, they can choke on Manderly cod on the way." Lyanna Mormont thumped her small fist on the table. "Bear Island will send men," she declared. "We fought worse weather than this and worse monsters than blue-eyed corpses. If the Night's Watch stands with a Mormont at its side, it stands stronger." Catelyn's gaze moved between them, pride and fear warring in her eyes. "You'll go yourself," she said to Jon. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Jon said. "I can't ask men to stand where I w. And the Watch knows me. The Wildlings do too. If there's going to be any chance of turning them into something that can hold this, it has to be me there to do it." Sansa's hand found his under the table, squeezing once. "Then go," she said, quickly. before that green light flares again and we find out what happens when the dead learn to play with it. Jon turned his palm to wrap around hers, gripping back. Robb needs warning, he said, about wildfire, about the dead watching. If the Lannisters or anyone else start throwing their jars of madness around near his lines, I'll send a raven, Sansa said, and a second, and a third. I'll make sure he can't say he didn't know. Jon nodded. The raven on the chair croaked once, as if offended at being asked to carry yet more bad news. He rose. The hall seemed to tilt slightly as he did, the weight of all the directions in which he was being pulled threatening to drag him apart. One war at a time, he murmured again. The gods would not grant him that mercy. He would fight them anyway. The day Jon rode north again, Winterfell woke before the sun. The courtyard filled with men and horses, the air alive with snorts and snatches of conversation, the clink of harness and the creak of leather. Torches sputtered along the walls, their light fighting a losing battle against the gray that crept up over the horizon. Snow fell steadily, not the wild sideways storm that sometimes swept down from the hills, but a calm, relentless sifting that turned helms and cloaks slowly white. It blurred the edges of the world, softening stone and steel alike. Jon moved among his chosen men, checking straps, buckles, the set of shields. He recognized more than half the faces, men who had followed him against Ramsay Bolton, who had stood in the shield wall while the Bolton's arrows tore holes in the line. Men who had lived through that and still chosen to come when he called for volunteers to ride into an even colder hell. "You don't have to go," he said quietly to one of them, a broad-shouldered man from the Karstark lands whose son had died at Winterfell's gates. "You've done more than enough." The man snorted. "My boy died to put you on that chair," he said. "If the dead come walking, I'd rather be there to hit them first than sit at home wondering if the sound outside my door is the wind or my own lad knocking with blue eyes." Jon had no answer to that. He clapped the man's shoulder and moved on. Ghost wove through the press a white shadow. Men parted instinctively to let him pass, some with muttered prayers, others with awed silence. The direwolf's presence steadied Jon as much as any armor. At the gate, horses stamped and tossed their heads, breath smoking. Ser Davos stood by Jon's mount, patting its neck with weathered hands. "Sturdy beast," he said as Jon approached. "Doesn't look like the sort to panic at shadows. Or at least, if he does, he'll take a good long while about it." "Like his rider," Jon said. He swung up into the saddle, the leather creaking. Davos squinted up at him. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Last time you went wandering off north of that wall, you came back with more holes than you left with. Or didn't come back at all, depending on how you count it." "I'm sure it has to be me," Jon said. "That's not the same thing." "Never is," Davos said. He stepped back, giving Ghost room to sit at the horse's flank. "I'll watch the girl." Jon's gaze flicked up to the ramparts. Sansa stood there, cloak pulled tight, copper hair hidden beneath a fur-lined hood. Catelyn stood beside her, face pale and set. "I'll watch them both," Davos added. "Best I can." "I know," Jon said. There was no one else he'd trust with that task more. The gates loomed ahead, dark and solid, streaked with old ice. The men on the winches shifted, ready. Jon raised his hand. "Open," he called. Chains rattled, growling through their housings. The gates heaved, then slowly, ponderously, they began to swing inward. The world beyond them came into view in slices: white ground, gray sky, a few bare trees clawing at the air. Jon nudged his horse forward. Ghost trotted beside him, the picture of lupin nonchalance. Behind them, the column began to move, the crunch of hooves and boots on snow echoing off the walls. As he passed beneath the arch, Jon looked up. Sansa's eyes met his. She lifted a hand, gloved fingers pale against the dark stone. Catelyn's lips moved, as if she were speaking a prayer to gods she was no longer sure of. Jon wanted to say something back. A promise, perhaps, or a reassurance he didn't entirely believe. The words tangled in his throat. In the end, he settled for a nod, firm and small, and the knowledge that if he turned back now, he'd never be able to look himself or them in the eye again. Outside the gates, the wind greeted them like an old adversary, immediately finding every gap in cloak and collar. The snowfield stretched ahead, marked by the faint grooves of the King's Road under its white blanket. Somewhere along that road, far ahead, the wall waited. "North again," muttered one of the men at Jon's back, half complaint, half grim acceptance. "Better than south," another replied. "Down there, the dead are still breathing. I don't trust them near as much." Laughter rippled through the column, thin but real. Jon let it wash around him, a small warmth in the cold. He glanced back once, just long enough to see Winterfell shrinking behind them, its walls already blurring in the falling snow. Smoke curled up from its chimneys, defiant black smudges against the gray sky. Then he turned his face to the wind and urged his horse into a steady trot. The men fell in behind, the White Wolf leading and the North's hopes riding a dark horse into the teeth of winter. The Riverlands in autumn had a beauty that the war had not quite managed to stamp out. Orange and red leaves clung stubbornly to some trees, while others stood bare against the darkening sky. The river itself moved with a slow, steady power, its banks scarred by old encampments and half-collapsed fortifications. Robb sat on a low stool outside his tent, the fire at his feet painting his face in warm tones that the night quickly stole at the edges. Above him, the canvas bore both the dire wolf of Stark and the leaping trout of Tully, the sigils shifting gently in the breeze. In his hands, the parchment crackled faintly as he unrolled it. The raven that had brought it sat on the tent rope, feathers puffed, head tucked under one wing, as if exhausted from more than just the flight. The script was Jon's, stark, uncompromising strokes, the letters marching across the page with the same grim determination he had seen in his brother's face. "Robb," he read under his breath. "No, your grace. No titles. Just the name, bare as bone." He read of the wall, of green fire in the woods and dead men walking through it, of Tormund's burned beard and Ed's bitter humor barely holding at bay the terror crouched behind his words. He read of Jon's decision to ride north, of the numbers he'd taken, of the men he'd left behind to hold Winterfell with Sansa and their mother. When he reached the part about wildfire and the dead together, he stopped, staring at the words until they blurred. Grey Wind's head lifted. The dire wolf whined softly, sensing his unease, then rose to move closer, laying his head on Robb's knee. The weight was reassuring. "Fire that doesn't stop them," Robb murmured, fingers threading automatically through Grey Wind's fur. "What else do we have left to throw at them? Rocks? Harsh language?" Brynden Tully emerged from the tent, the flap whispering shut behind him. He held another rolled map in one hand. His eyes flicked to the letter. "Bad news?" he asked. "Just news," Robb said. "It's all bad lately, so there's no need to dress it up." He handed the letter over. Brynden read, his lined face growing grimmer with each line. "Well," the Blackfish said finally, "if the dead are learning from the living, that seems unfair. We've been trying not to learn from them for years." He tapped the section about wildfire. "This matters. Cersei Lannister plays with jars of hellfire beneath her city, and somewhere up there, the corpses are taking notes. We'll have to be careful," Robb said. "No siege engines with stolen wildfire near the front. No clever plans involving blowing up bridges while White Walkers are on them." "Shame," Brynden said. "I had a few songs ready for that particular site." Robb managed a twitch of a smile. Then it faded. "He's going back up there," he said, "to stand on that wall while they throw themselves at it. While they learn how to walk through every trick, he has to keep them on the other side." "You went south to fight for Father's memory," Brynden said. "He goes north to fight for everyone else's future. You're not so different." "I knelt to him," Robb said, "thinking I was handing him the crown and keeping the danger down here with me. I didn't realize I was also putting him in front of this." Brynden snorted softly. "You think he'd have stayed safe in Winterfell if you'd kept the crown?" Jon Snow, the lad who joined the Night's Watch because he thought it was the right thing to do when everyone told him not to. Robb pictured it. Jon sitting on Ned's high seat while messages came from the wall, describing dead men in the snow. No, he admitted. He'd have ridden north anyway, crown or no crown. Exactly, Brynden said. Only now, when he calls for help, he does it as a king. And when you answer, you do it as his man, not some rival clinging to his own little patch of glory. He glanced at the maps spread on the crate. Speaking of which, he said, we have our own corpses to worry about. Lannister stragglers. A few bands of Sellswords convinced there's still plunder to be had. They may not be blue-eyed, but they'll kill as surely as any walker if we let them. Robb nodded, folding the letter carefully and tucking it into his belt. We set patrols along the eastern bank, he said. Keep the roads clear. We show the river lords that a Stark host means safety, not another wave of looting. And we send word south, quietly, to those who might listen. About the dead? Brynden asked. About the fact that if they don't stop playing Queen of the Ashes, there won't be a realm left for them to squabble over, Robb said. We find the few intelligent men and women left in King's Landing, in Highgarden, in Old Town. We tell them what Jon has seen. If they laugh, fine. If even a handful listen, he let the thought trail off. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks upward. For a moment, he imagined them turning blue as they rose, little ghosts of the danger further north. You're starting to sound like a king again, Brynden said. Robb shook his head. No, he said. I'm starting to sound like a man who's realized that refusing to use what little power he has because he's afraid of becoming what he once was is as bad as never having had it at all. He looked down at Grey Wind. The wolf's eyes gleamed back at him, steady and unblinking. Come on, Robb said, rising. Let's show the Trident what a warden looks like when he's not wearing a crown. The realm looked different depending on where you stood. From the wall, it was a white emptiness stretching south until the snow gave way, then further, vanishing into a haze of distance where the cold couldn't quite reach. From the banks of the Trident, it was rivers and fields and the stubborn outlines of farmsteads that had survived burning to rise again. But if some god or some half-broken red priestess had looked down on it from above, they would have seen the same thing Jon and Robb were only starting to sense. A web beginning to knit itself back together, threads of raven flight and marching feet tying stone to stone, man to man. Ravens flew. They winged their way north from the Twins and the Trident, carrying Robb's cautious words about Freys subdued and crossings opened, about riverlords slowly, hesitantly, turning their eyes north for something other than old grievances. They flew east from White Harbor, bearing Wyman's promises of ships and salted fish, of harbor space for any ally fleeing southern madness. They flew south from Winterfell too, when Sansa put her hand to the quill. Her letters were different from the brusque missives of war. They spoke of winter coming in language southern ladies understood. Shortages, strain, the need for cooperation. Cloaked in talk of trade and marriages, they carried warnings about dead men in the snow, about wildfire in haunted forests. Some were laughed at, others were filed away by careful minds in Highgarden, in Old Town, in Dorne, labeled fanciful northern tales and possible threats in equal measure. On the King's Road, Jon's column moved steadily north, black and gray dots against the white. They made camp each night in ruined towers and half-collapsed inns, the sounds of their fires carrying too far in the brittle air. Ghost ranged ahead, returning with snow on his fur and strange scents in his nose. Men told stories around the flames, some about the dead, some about Robb's easy laugh in the training yard, some about Sansa standing at the hall's high end with her shoulders squared. On the wall, men hacked ice and mended crumbling stairs with numb fingers. They drilled with dragonglass-dipped spears and torches soaked in pitch. Tormund's raiders came and went, slipping into the dark beyond and returning with tales of white shadows and blue lights. Behind their jokes, their eyes were hard. At Winterfell, Sansa convened councils as the days shortened. She sat in Ned Stark's chair with Catelyn on one side and Davos on the other, Lyanna Mormont and Wyman Manderly arguing across the table with all the furious affection of kin who had nearly lost each other. They talked of grain and taxes, of how many men could be spared without leaving villages naked to the cold. When tempers flared, Sansa's voice cut through. Not loud, but with a steel that made men who'd survived half a dozen battles think twice about crossing her. In the godswood, the heart tree watched. It had seen Starks kneel before it for centuries, offering their fears and hopes to its red leaves. Now it listened to the prayers of a woman who had once been Catelyn Tully, asking strange northern gods to watch over sons who had become things no southern sept had prepared her for. A king who rode into snow to fight death, and a boy who had set down his crown to take up a different burden. Further south, along the Trident, Robb's host marched. Their banners, wolf and trout, bear and merman, flapped in a wind that carried the last sour hints of summer's decay. Villagers watched from doorways as they passed, eyes wary but not as hollow as they had been when Lannister lions prowled these roads. Some even raised hands in tentative blessing, old gestures dredged up from the time when Eddard Stark's name had meant something solid and good down here. In stolen moments, Robb wrote by firelight. Letters to Jon, to Sansa, to a river lord here and there who might be coaxed into seeing beyond the next harvest. He wrote of small victories. A band of Sellswords talked into taking service under his banner instead of turning brigand. A burned village reclaimed and its fields replanted with winter crops. He did not write of his nightmares, where the river ran not with water but with wildfire, the dead walking across it unharmed. Above all of it, winter settled. Snow crept further south each week, frosting fields that had never known it so early. Rivers slowed at the edges. Temples in southern towns saw more candles lit to stranger gods. Children playing in castle yards turned their games of knights and dragons into stories about white kings and wolf riders. Half-remembered fragments of overheard gossip and old tales stitched together in the way only children could. No one noticed when the first of the small folk started saying, "Our king in the north," instead of "the northern king." It slipped into speech like a stone into a river, sinking beneath the surface but changing the current in ways that wouldn't be seen for some time. Far beyond the wall, where even wildlings rarely walked, the dead moved. They stepped in patterns that might, to an eye older than men's, have been mistaken for strategy. Where once they had pushed mindlessly against the living, now they paused, tested, learned. A blue-eyed creature in remnants of black watched a patch of scorched earth where wildfire had once burned, then turned and walked on, unhurried. On a high ridge of ice, something taller and colder than the rest stood, watching the faint orange line of the wall in the far distance. It had no use for ravens, no need for letters. It felt the stir of resistance in the soft, warm lands beyond and altered its steps accordingly. Two wolves ran through the dreams of its prey, one dark, one gray, their howls echoing from Winterfell's towers to the wall's edge and across the Trident's slow waters. The dead heard those howls. So did the living. The realm was not ready. It would never truly be ready. But for the first time in generations, its scattered pieces were beginning to remember how to fit together, not under the weight of a single crown, but under the shared knowledge that if they did not, there would be no crowns left to fight over at all.